Good evening, everyone. The time is 6:31, and I would like to call this District 204 Committee the whole meeting with action to order. Marilyn, can you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez.
Present.
Member Rita Daniels.
Present.
Member Gazelka Campbell.
Present.
Member Dillon.
Yes.
Member Giannotti Fry.
Yes.
Member Kennedy.
Present.
Member Lopez.
Present.
Okay, I ask that we all rise and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our next item is public participation. Marilyn, do we have anyone signed up for tonight's first public comment session?
We do.
Okay. As a reminder, there are two opportunities for public participation. The first opportunity is for individuals who signed up prior to the meeting. For those who wish to speak during our second opportunity at the end of the meeting, please see Marilyn Muscolino just outside the room. The board appreciates hearing from our community but does not engage in dialogue or discussion. If there is a comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. In accordance with board policies 2:230 and 8:30, we appreciate you limiting your comments to 3 minutes and for keeping tonight's meeting respectful and civil. Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
Cindy Murray.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cindy Murray.
Oh, sorry. Can you come up to the...
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cindy Murray. I'm the health para nurse over at South Campus, for those of you who don't know me. I am here for the Para Educators Association. Is proud to welcome our new board members. On behalf of all of you, thank you for your willingness to serve. Our school and community thrive when dedicated individuals like you come together with a shared purpose. Your commitment makes it a meaningful difference, and we are excited to begin this journey with you. We look forward to the collaborative and positive partnership with the strength our community and creates a brighter future for our students, staff, families, and the entire school district. Thank you again, and once again, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
There are no additional speakers at this time.
Very good. So I just wanted to say something very quick. Last board meeting was in honor of those who had served before me, and I didn't feel like it was the appropriate time to do this, but I did want to just say a few words of gratitude to my fellow board members for electing me president. I am honored, and I anticipate to hope to serve you and our community and our staff well. There are a lot of amazing individuals that sat in this seat before me, and I want to honor and recognize them as well. So thank you for giving me that just brief opportunity to say something. That being said, our next item is our finance action item. We'll begin this evening with finance action item, the consideration of approval for the tentative amended FY25 budget. Brian Sanchez.
Thank you,
Sanchez,
President.
sorry.
Thank you, President Alborz. Good evening, everybody. And so what you have before you today is an amended budget for FY25. And what that means is, just for the new board members here and a refresher for the board members who've been here, our fiscal year runs July 1 to June 30. And so right now, we are amending the budget that would, we say FY25 because it ends June 30th of 2025. And so we're bringing before you today an amended budget, which I had planned to do initially anyway, because back when we adopted the original budget in September of '24 for this current school year, we had construction projects that we knew we were going to bid, and we didn't have any expenses in for those because at that time, until we actually know what the bids are, we don't know how much to actually budget and put forward in those in the expense category for those projects. So that was the plan all along, was to amend the budget once we had the projects that were known. However, I can also tell you that as I've been looking through this year's budget and following what's happening, there are a couple of areas where, one substantially, where we have to actually add some expenditure dollar amounts. And so let me just kind of take you through here what we have. First of all, if you look on the memo that I have there for you, you'll see that we're adding $8 million of expense in the capital projects fund, and that's related to the summer of 2025 projects. So that was expected all along. That was part of the adoption of those projects for this coming summer in the summer of 25. And so there's nothing new there. That is just simply, we knew that was coming. We are now adding that expense to the budget for this coming year. In addition to that, now we go into the benefits line for medical insurance costs. I'm going to spend a little time on this just so everybody kind of understands what happens here. The district handles insurance a little differently than what a lot of districts do. And what I mean by that is we are self-funded for our medical insurance, which means, and we're actually in a small insurance pool, if you will, with LADSI, which is our special ed cooperative. And so what that means is we actually fund, we look at how much we think it's going to cost to run the program for the year. Then we generate what would look like a premium based on what we think it's going to cost to run the program for the year. Then the district essentially pays 78% of that, and the employees 22% of that total dollar amount. So this year, as we went through all of our normal processes, as we do, we obviously put a dollar amount, a budget into this line item for what we believed would be the amount that would be expected for this coming year. And in fact, I can tell you that amount over last year originally, from last year's actual to this year's budget, I had budgeted $800,000 more than what we had actually spent in the prior year last year. This year, we are seeing a real increase in essentially what these costs are. I have not seen an increase in this arena this high. And again, what's different about that, going back to what I was talking about before, is the fact that the district, being self-insured, pays for the claims. It isn't just about paying premium, right? So if you buy first dollar insurance, what ends up happening is, think of your auto insurance, your homeowner's insurance, you pay a premium, and if you never utilize that, the insurance for any reason, they're not giving you any of that money back generally in any way, shape, or form, right? So what we do is we pay the claims. We set that number in terms of our premium, what we think it's going to cost to run the program. We set that number, say, okay, it's going to cost the district on their 78%, $7.5 million this year. The good part about that is if it costs us $7 million, well, that $500,000 is retained by the district. We're not giving it out to anybody and then never seeing it come back again. On the downside of that, the risk is that if you budget $7.5 million and your expenses are $10 million, well, then we still have to fund that additional $10 million. And so in my prior 10 years here in the district, we've certainly seen variations, years where we've spent more, years where we've spent less. This one, so far to me, is really an outlier in terms of what I've seen increasing in medical costs. And so what we're actually looking at here is the addition of about $3.5 million to the benefits line, medical benefits for this coming year. I have been working with our brokers to kind of determine what's going on here. And I can't go into detail in a public meeting about, what's out there, but what I can tell you is that we are seeing, I think we have 7 high claimants more than what we had at this time last year. And so a high claimant is typically somebody who's around a particular claim. It's not an individual's total cost for the year, but anything that would be above like $50,000, but it's for one particular issue. And so what I mean by that is, if you go to the doctor a few times this year and, maybe there's another time again, a bad example, but you cut yourself, you go for stitches, those are individual claims on one person, right? When we talk about a high claimant, we're talking about one medical issue that results in costs above $50,000. Now, that could be all the way up to $200,000 because the district has an attachment point of stop-loss insurance at $200,000 per claim, essentially, per individual. And so this year, we're still kind of looking at the data with our broker. But again, those high claimants certainly are a factor in what's happening here. You also look at, in insurance, you look at frequency and severity, right? So we have some of the severity going on, and then we're also looking at the frequency of, what other types of things are we seeing? Are they higher cost surgeries that are getting us to $30,000, but they aren't jumping on the radar as the high claimants, and are we seeing more of those this year? So that's really what we're looking at with our brokers to determine essentially, because while this is a concern for me, it certainly right now is an outlier year in terms of what I've seen over the last 10 years. My concern also going forward is what does this look like going into next year or the year after that, right? And so that's where we work with our brokers. We're looking at, when you talk about the high claimants, how many of those are going to be recurring issues? Because there are some of those, where you have a disease of some sort, there's no cure, but it's manageable, right? And so you might continue to stay on that high claimant list for an extended period of time. And so we have to look at all of that. We have to look at that frequency issue as well and kind of put together the numbers for next year and then make some determinations of what we would be budgeting for next year and for future years. So we are looking at that. I'm also going to look into potentially some other options as well. And we can talk about those at another time. But nonetheless, there is a large school district medical insurance pool out there that has, I think, 120 school districts as part of it. And if you join that particular group, you would pay the premium, right? So the claim cost goes away, you pay the premium, and then there is some ability to get some money back if the group of 120 districts doesn't use all the money that they need in that year. There is the ability to get to return some of that. Now, again, there's some positives and negatives to that in that you may not receive as much money back because you're splitting it up with a pool of other districts. But it's certainly something to look at, especially considering, the size of this number going forward for this year. So I kind of want to stop with that one and just see if anybody has any questions on, where we're at with that.
I do have two.
Yep.
So what is the year for the health insurance? So is it like January to December? Does it go with our fiscal year? Like, what is the fiscal year?
That's a good question. I budget on the fiscal year basis, but our renewal is January 1st. So when I look at a fiscal year, I have half of one fiscal year half of one calendar year in one of our fiscal years, and the other half of a calendar year in a different fiscal year.
And then, do you know, like, how, are we in line with other, because I think we talked about this previously when we discussed this, like, are we in line with other school districts? Are they seeing the same thing that you know of?
I don't know the answer.
Will be an outlier.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question yet, but I'm going to look, and it's one of the reasons I kind of want to talk with sort of that EBC group and kind of see what they're seeing, because they have a really large number of districts that they work with, and so it might be that they're seeing that there's some increased costs. Certainly we know inflation has affected everything we do in the last 3-4 years. But it is something that I do want to look into. I don't have a great answer to that right now, but I am looking into to see what we can find on that.
All right, and then I guess I had three, so I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So where do the funds come from then? Because, I'm always concerned,
Right.
and I know, like, the history, because I know there's 3 new board members here, but
Yeah.
when we look back at that history with regards to the fund balance,
Yeah.
is it coming from there? Like, just so we have, like, a clear understanding of, obviously, we have to make up that difference, and we have, quote-unquote savings, but is that coming from the fund balance?
It will. Ultimately, it will. That's where those dollars would end up having to come from. And that's, again, why I'm looking at these future years and wanting to say, okay, is there anything else that we can do to mitigate this? And I also, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, looking at some of this from a different lens with potentially a different group, I also want to see if our if our plans are priced appropriately, where we're at with the coverage and the costs and those sorts of things. So, but to answer your question, that's where it would come from, is from the fund balance at this point.
And then we really have no choice then. It has to come from the fund balance. There's no other.
Yeah, yeah. And
Looking at the funding aspect of it.
right. And what I'd also like to mention here too is I have not gone through and adjusted any of the other numbers in this budget, right? And so I'm not looking at everything and saying, okay, well, we're gonna have some money left over here, we're gonna be, short here, and I'm not doing that at this point. And generally, what I try to avoid doing that, because what it does then is when I start looking at budgeting data for next year, it starts to give me information that isn't actually accurate, because we in May amended the budget and in June amended the budget. So we've kind of amended it to what our expenses are. But at that point, I really need to look at that data from the prior year and say, okay, what did we originally budget? And then how much, how close were we, right? And so that's what I'll be looking at as well with that information. There's certainly a chance that, as you see in here, if you look at, it now says a $3.9 million deficit, with 3.5 being attributable to the insurance, right? So the majority of that is related to the insurance. There are certainly areas in this budget where I don't think we're going to spend as much money. And so there could be some offset there. We're still following the revenues to make sure that all of our revenues are coming in, and they seem to be coming in appropriately where we thought they were going to be. So certainly there still could be some offset to this, that the $3.9 million deficit doesn't actually materialize that way. The problem with that, though, is we still have May and June to go this year. And then, remember, because we work on an accrual basis, our books are going to be open through July and August, so that we're still bringing in invoices for items that we purchased or services that were rendered prior to June 30th. So those things are still ongoing. So we really don't get a great look at what happened in the fiscal year until really the fall. So, November, December timeline, when our audit is done and we have all the final financial numbers for the year.
As far as going to look at information from the other insurance, we don't have to commit to it right away, correct? To be able to gather information?
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, we can look at that.
That's what's okay.
And then we can make a determination. Certainly, before we would commit to anything, we would want to have some good data, some good information. We would want to talk with the board. We have an insurance committee in the district that we work with, made up of various staff members. We would want to talk with them. Of course, LADSI's involved with us. We would want to talk with them. So there's a lot of conversation. It isn't something that would happen overnight, let's put it that way. It's something certainly that would take, I would guess, at minimum 6 to 9 months, somewhere in that area, to get everything together and then have those conversations. We would have those conversations somewhere in that time period, but it would take a while. And again, we're essentially, right now, our current year is going through the end of December on our insurance. So we're locked in till then anyway. And so we'll have to, if something makes sense, we'll bring that back to the board, for discussion about it, potentially a different way to go with that.
Can I
Thank
just
you.
ask one question of clarification, just maybe for the benefit of the new people here? Like to maybe talk about the fund balance, because it took me 4 years to fully understand
Yeah.
it. 3.5, so, you know what I mean? Where we really had that conversation to say where we are at, give a little bit of history on it, which
Yeah.
I think might be helpful for the
Sure.
conversation tonight.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. So the fund balance simply refers to the amount of money that we have that essentially, for an easy term, is sort of like the savings account, right? Money that we have accumulated over the years due to surpluses, potentially interest, earnings, expenses that weren't as high, So there's a lot of reasons you would accumulate surplus in your fund balance. And so that's really what it comes down to. Again, of course, you don't want to, as we all know from our home economies, you don't want to go into your savings account to pay your bills. If you're doing that, maybe it's a one-time kind of thing, that's okay. But if it's repetitive, that becomes problematic. And so we don't want to do that here, continue using the fund balance. But that fund balance, we're trying to keep that fund balance around 50% revenue to fund balance ratio. So just for round numbers, if our revenue is $100 million, we'd like to keep about $50 million in that. That's not the exact numbers, it's close. We'd like to keep about $50 million in there, in the fund balance. And that number has come from really our auditors, from our bond broker, people who understand school district finance and are, kind of saying, hey, look, this is a good number to keep. And so we're trying to be cognizant of that. The projects that we have coming up for next year, we know that they were going to drop down a little bit below that. We're going to be about 47% in terms of fund balance. Yet obviously the projects are important as well. And kind of what I said earlier, the use of fund balance for non-recurring expenditures, so for a project, that's a good use of fund balance. Again, you don't want to use it to go and pay your salaries or your benefits, those types of things recurring, because eventually that runs out, and then what do you do? So that's where we are with that. We're trying to keep it around 50%. So based on the projects that we have coming up, we said it'd be about 47. This one would probably, if we were to realize this $3.9 million deficit, we'd probably end up about 45% when it's all said and done. And so again, I'm going to continue to watch this and continue to look at it, and hopefully I don't know that the medical insurance will change this year, but I'm hoping that there's some additional savings that we see in some other areas, and we're able to offset some of that as we go.
And then just so I recall correctly, when we go 45%, because we have our rating that we have, that might impact our rating.
Yeah. I don't think 45% is going to impact the rating.
Okay.
I really don't. There's multiple areas. And so what Jill is referring to is when we sold our bonds a year and a half ago, we have to go through a rating agency test, right? And so what we did was at that time, we scored a AAA rating, which is, there aren't many districts in the state of Illinois that have a AAA rating. Many of them are very good, AA pluses, AA, all that sort of thing. But a AAA is really the highest you can obtain. And so we did that. And there are many factors that go into that. Certainly the fund balance is one portion of it, but they look at the strength of the community. They look at, and when I say strength of the community, talk about financial, it's about housing markets. They look at all those things and your ability essentially to levy a tax and pay that money back, which is ultimately what happens. And so there's a lot of items that go into that. But so we had the AAA rating. We also, of course, we're rated by the state of Illinois in terms of what they look at for financial ratings, which the district has been in recognition, which is at the top category. And I don't really see that changing with this either. I think we're still going to stay in that top category.
Great news. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Brian.
Question, Brian, if I could.
Yeah.
So just so I understand, the $3.5 million deficit is from claims, but not claims that were high enough to go into the reinsurance category?
That's correct.
So is there, and you didn't mention this, and I don't even know if it's an option, is there a way to possibly in the future drop that number down a little bit to cover stuff like this? Obviously paying more premium there for that
Yep.
insurance, but having this potentially covered.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the answer is yes. I mean, that certainly is possible. But you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? Ultimately, that's what's going to happen here. And what ends up happening is it becomes a balancing act isn't the right term, but it becomes a balancing exercise in looking at how much premium are you paying for the stop loss insurance, right? So let's say we're at $1 million for stop loss insurance, which isn't too far off of what we're currently paying for the program. And then you lower that threshold to $150,000 or $100,000. You can certainly do that. And let's say that premium then, is 1.5 or 2 times higher, right? So you're $1.5 million to $2 million. And then you only go into that level by $600,000 or $700,000, right? So you go in there because all those other claims are below that $200,000 threshold. You bought that insurance and you put another $500,000 or $1 million in there, and you didn't even access that dollar amount. So it's a balancing act of trying to find what is the right number to purchase, if that makes sense.
And that would start to make more sense if you started to see numbers like this more consistently as opposed to an outlier as you
That's,
run it.
that's correct. That would. If this year, if we said, hey, look, we're going to keep the program the way it is, and we're not going to do anything different, that might be an answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Brian, we've had this has been our insurance policy probably forever.
I don't know how long it's been that way, but I know it's been that way for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, again, nothing new in terms of how we're operating. It's just the fact that we're seeing such an increase in one year that really, again, I've seen variations in a year where,
Right.
you know, we're $1 million over, 2 million, $1 million under. Yeah, I mean, those things happen because it's
I think
insurance.
those COVID years, we were actually.
Way under. We were way under, because people weren't going to the doctor. And those sort of, I don't know what you want to call them, but let's call them mid-level types of surgeries, right? Hip replacement, knee replacement, they weren't happening.
Right.
Right? So they would never get into that $200,000 threshold, but maybe they're 50,000 or 30, you know, whatever the numbers are. And those things weren't happening at that time. So, for an extended period of time.
I'm very interested in seeing if joining a group of some sort will help us. I think that's great that you're looking into that, because
Yeah.
I know we've talked about that. I would be curious if that ends up saving us some money down the road. Obviously, I don't like hearing that our employees are getting ill and these costs are going up, right?
Yeah.
That's certainly a concern. But if we ended up doing a change like that, would that impact contract? Would that so I know you said there's an insurance committee that they would sit down and go over that.
We would, yeah.
We would have to amend the contract potentially, or no?
I don't think so. I need to look at all that contract language. I think I want to look at all of it first.
Yeah.
And then talk through that with the committee and, you know, everybody else involved with that. I don't want to say yes, and I don't want to say no, but I think we'd be okay. But again, I need to
Yeah.
go back and look through that language. And again, the benefit of looking at, you know, potentially a pool, right, a larger pool, is the fact that now your rates are stable throughout the year. That's one benefit, right? So you don't have this uncertainty. And there is the potential to still maybe receive some money back in a future year. It may not be as much as we have right now. So there might be some real benefit to that, too, to look at this. And again, I'm trying not to panic, because this is 1 year in terms of what we've seen. And historically, this has really worked out well for the district. But this year, obviously, we're seeing quite a bit higher, significant cost. Yeah,
That's a concern.
yeah.
And just to add on to Tim's point, if we're looking at this pool opportunity, can we also possibly look at just free market and see if that is even an option? Is that not within the realm of what we would consider?
So if we, again, kind of what I said before, we could certainly look at pricing out our plans on like a first dollar, what we call first dollar insurance, right? That means that you go to Blue Cross and Blue Shield or whatever, Humana, whoever it is, and you buy a plan with them. That certainly is an option. What you lose there, though, is the ability to recapture any money that's not utilized, right? So that's the only, I say only, I mean, that's one of the downsides to that. Where we have that ability now, and we could have it if we went to another pool, but we'd have to, in that case, we would, you know, let's say we give them $10 million and we use $9 million, it doesn't matter, the other $1 million's gone.
Right.
Yeah, so it's an option,
But I
certainly.
am curious if there might possibly be some level of additional savings, just from looking at it from.
Sure, we can certainly take a look at that.
Reason being just because chronic disease continues to escalate.
Right.
We know it's going to continue to increase, so it's US-wide, so it's, we're going to possibly be seeing
Sure,
this kind of a trend moving forward.
yeah. Something we can definitely look at, and we can bring that back and say, look, if we purchased a policy here with Blue Cross, this is what our premiums would amount to.
And there could be some stability with that too, I guess, if that was part of the contract.
It is stable, and because then you've locked in, you know, your premiums for every year, and then you know, again, you just lose the ability to recapture any money in a future year when you don't spend it, if you don't spend it.
Do you know roughly in the 10 years, this one excluded, what the average is? Do we recapture $500,000? Do we?
I don't off the top of my head. And again, I can tell you there have been years that have been very good, years that haven't been as good. You know, I suppose if I don't even want to hazard a guess. I can look at that and give you an idea over like the last 10 years what that looks like.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Non-COVID years.
Well, they're in there, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, actually, when you look at that, we actually, there was benefit to us for that, because in one of those years, I forget if it was 21 or 22, the fiscal year, we had a 0% increase, because we were sitting there and we were, you know, looking at everything that was going on, and so I get it, what you're saying certainly makes sense, but there was benefit, and the employees loved the fact that, hey, we had a 0% increase this year, you know, that was great. Now you take the good with the bad, obviously, you know. But I can certainly look up those, and bring that back at a future date as we start looking, you know, digging more into this and getting some ideas about that, certainly.
Thanks, Ray.
Sure.
All right, any other questions on insurance?
Okay, then we'll continue on. And so just a couple of other items here that I, as far as the expense goes, I'm adding $500,000 to student transportation costs. Again, this is the only uncertainty in the student transportation cost oftentimes is more on the side of our special ed transportation, because we don't always know how many students will need to be transported in a given year. That changes as we go year to year. And so I'm looking at that, adding about $500,000 there. And then also in our out-of-district tuition programs. So for students who are with LT, but for whatever reason, their needs need to be serviced at an outside location, we're running a little bit higher there too this year. And again, that is ultimately just a function of the number of students that we have involved in those programs. We take a somewhat of an educated guess at the start of the year, but it doesn't matter. If students come in or they go out, we have to be able to educate them regardless of what the dollars are. And those two really, you know, when we first started off in this budget back in September when we adopted it, there was actually a $600,000 surplus to the budget. And so these two really here would, you know, even adding these, we might have a small deficit, but I don't even think that would happen. It's really, what's driving this right now is that medical insurance piece. So, any questions on any of the expenses at all?
I was only just gonna ask, it's related to everything as part of the process, again, talking to new members and stuff, is what that process is for how we approve, like the tentative, and then, like, how many more times does this come back to us? To
Sure.
have a conversation? Discuss?
Sure. Would it be okay if we went through and just talked a little
sure.
bit about the
Finish,
transfer
yeah,
first? Because
thanks.
we'll come back to all that, and I can take everybody
Yeah.
through that. Great.
Thanks, Brian.
Sure. And so the other item here that I wanted to discuss with everybody are transfers. And so the reason that you are seeing $18.6 million of a total transfer is that when we started the current bond sale project, so this is the project at South Campus, we anticipated that we would need about $5 million in addition to the bond sale money to cover the cost of those projects. So that accounts for the $5 million that's there. The projects that we are going to start here really at North Campus this coming summer, the summer of 2025, there was an estimate of about $13.6 million in total for those projects. And so we were paying for those out of the district, out of the fund balance, which is where we had those conversations about maintaining that, you know, close to 50% balance in our fund balances. And so this particular transfer I'm just going to move all of the money because we're going to start seeing expenses for the summer of 2025. Plus, we're still paying out on the capital projects from really the summer of 2024, the South Campus bond projects. And so I'm going to move all of that money over. It'll get moved to the capital projects fund. And there's really two transfers. There's the first transfer of $13.6 million from the education fund to the O&M fund. And then from the O&M fund, we're going to take 13.6 from the ed fund plus 5 from the O&M fund, and then move all of that into the capital projects fund. And you might be saying, well, why can't we just move it all at one time? The state of Illinois requires us that if we're going to move money from the ed fund to the O&M fund, which we legally have the authority to do, it requires a public hearing at which we would look at doing that at the May 19th board meeting and have that resolution approved. And then also, the second resolution, we already have a resolution from September to move $5 million. So we don't have to move the $5 million. We don't have to do that resolution again. But we then need to do a resolution from transferring, after we transfer from the O&M fund, we have a resolution from the Ed fund to the O&M fund, and then there'll be a resolution from the O&M fund into the capital projects fund. So ultimately, I'm explaining to you here the 18.6 total, but really the transfer at this point will be 13.6 is what we'll ask the board for the authority to do out of the Ed fund, O&M, and then O&M to capital projects, and that will require a public hearing, which there'll be notice going out in the newspaper this Thursday. And so we'll be asking the board to approve that transfer, because we will again have expenditures coming in, expense related to these projects, coming in certainly through June, July, and into August. We want to make sure we have the money in the capital projects fund to fund those expenses. And again, none of that is new. That was all planned, that was all discussed. This is nothing new here in terms of how we're moving that money around. Okay, any other questions?
So I do, at the top of the page 2 of that memo, you have that the amended budget
Yeah.
shows $3.9 million deficit, but it could be me, so just, break it down for me, I'm sorry. How are you getting to that? Because when I look up above, it looks more like, 4.5.
If you look at,
That's where I'm like, I'm
so
lost.
here's, yeah,
I'm sorry.
it's a great question.
I just, I'm like, I really needed spoon-fed, so I
It's a great question, but remember, we had a $6,000 surplus going into the budget
Got it,
for
okay.
last year.
So that's where, okay.
If
I'm
you
with
take
it.
the 4.5, subtract the 600,000 that we had for a potential surplus, you back down to the 3.9.
600,000.
Did I say 600,000?
Yeah.
Sorry, 600,000.
Okay.
I apologize. Then that's good math there, right? That makes sense.
Okay, I totally get it now, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I just-
that's why. Yeah,
I struggle with this, so thank you.
yeah. Any other questions?
Validate it when Brian says I have a good question, so thank you.
No, it makes, it completely makes sense.
I feel like you're building me up, so I appreciate it when I ask these questions, because.
So, and just for the board's view, what I do is, if you look at the form, the 5036, the state budget form, there are a lot of cells. It's a complicated, it's not complicated, but it's a long spreadsheet that has a lot of information on it, right? So what I do there on the second page there of right after the memo, or the first page after the memo, I break it down for you, and I just kind of show you what is actually happening in the different funds based on this new amended budget. And so you can see what we spend in all of the categories here, what our revenues are in those different categories. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of those. But again, this ties directly out to what this budget does. And I like this sheet because it really just kind of summarizes everything right in front of you. You can see it, and it's all there without having to kind of hunt through the state form for it. So as far as the process goes, this is the same process, amending a budget is the same process as it will be for adopting the budget that we will do in August and September of this year. So what ends up happening is I present to the board a tentative budget, this is the tentative amended budget. The board adopts that tentative amended budget, and then we notify the community that it'll be on display. It has to be on display for at least 30 days prior to the board adopting the final, in this case, final amended budget. And that process is the same when we adopt the original budget in August and in September. Nothing changes there. So what ultimately will end up happening is, also notice going in the newspaper this Thursday for the amended budget that it will be available from the 8th until, May 8th until we would adopt it, what is that, the 16th of June? I think, yeah. So it'll be on display for more than 30 days. We'll put a copy up on the website. People have questions, they certainly are welcome to come in and ask us those. And then we will also, at the June meeting, we then have to have a public hearing to adopt the amended budget. And I can tell you that typically what I will do is I will continue to watch these, as I do with the August into September. And if something changes, I have the ability to make changes. Of course, I inform the board of any of those changes that I make from the amended to the final of, to the adoption. And so I'll continue to watch these. If there are any changes, anything that I see, things get a little better for us, who knows, I'll amend the amended budget, if you will, the tentative budget, and then I'll bring that back to the board. I don't see much changing here right now, though, but we'll keep an eye on that going forward.
Because of that 30-day window that's required, if we have 30 days between the regular action meeting from 1 month to the next, then we can deal with it at both regular action meetings, but since we don't,
Right.
we have a May 19th meeting and then a June 16th meeting. That's why this is one of those rare occasions where we'll have a committee of the whole meeting that we require
Right.
action. So that's a.
And we've had to do that, we've had to do
Yeah.
that in August too at times, because we bring that, and if we don't have the 30 days between the two August board, there are years that we do, and there are years that we don't.
Right.
Be happy to answer any other questions on this.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the tentative amended FY '25 budget as presented?
So move.
Second?
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Kozowska Campbell?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Giannotti Fry?
Yes.
Member Kennedy?
Yes.
Member Lopez?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes. Motion passes. We will now move on to the Finance Committee informational items, starting with emergency authorization for repair of the South Campus gym. Again, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. So what we have before you today is essentially a request for an emergency authorization for a repair of the gymnasiums 1, 2, 3, and 4 at South Campus, where we essentially have a glazed block that is part of the gymnasiums. It is, for really all intents and purposes, mostly decorative in terms of its function. It does not structurally support the gymnasium walls. But as we talk about the fact that a picture could be worth 1,000 words, I was able to grab some pictures and put them in your packet so you can kind of see what we are experiencing here, and what we need to have essentially removed and replaced. And so we are looking at the emergency authorization, basically for the most part, because we're looking at the time frame of this. We would really like to get this done this summer, and if we don't, then let me take a step back. Normally, the process for a project like this at almost $450,000, we would be going to bid on the project, right? So we would have the architects, who, by the way, Ed Wright from DLA is with us tonight, so he can answer questions about this as well. We would put bid specifications together. We'd go out, we would bid that. That would probably take at least a month or so in that process. We would have to then, evaluate those bids, bring them back to the board, and then have, approval for that. And then move forward with the project. At this point, it would be kind of difficult for us to do any of that and bring it back to the board in June, and then get the project essentially completed. So what we're really looking at here is wanting to get this done in time for the start of next school year. And so there certainly is an option to bid this project, but we would then be going into next school year and have to take those gymnasiums out of service for some time while the project was going on. And essentially, we had just received an estimate from Hap Builders, and Hap Builders is currently the general contractor who's doing the work at South Campus for all of the cafeteria, for the music wing. And so they had given us this cost based on the fact that they have people already on site, they're mobilized, and they could look at doing this and getting it done for us this summer, along with that emergency provision. And so, again, what you have here is a quote, like I said, for $443,000 essentially, $443,700 to remove and replace that essentially that block. The location for this in the budget would be for next year's capital outlay, which we would, and again, this is the kind of thing that we're going to have to do. We have to budget for it. We have to put that money in someplace. But the anticipation is there'd be nothing paid out this year. That would be paid out in all of next year's budget because we'd probably be starting maybe in June, maybe July. I don't know. It's something we'd have to take a look at. But that being said, be happy to answer any questions on this from anybody. And again, as we said, we do have Ed Wright with us from DLA Architects. Ed can also answer questions for us on this as well.
I do have a couple questions.
Sure.
You answered the first one, so ornamental. Is this replacing all of the block or just what we see broken?
No, it would be removing all of it there are two gymnasiums. We have a curtain that, we can split them up.
Separate,
So it's
yeah.
1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So it's all of that block within those 2 or 4 gymnasiums.
gyms.
Correct.
Is there a cheaper alternative other than the ornamental block? Is there a drywall with a cushion over it? So, or, is this coming from wear and tear of basketballs or things hitting it?
Great question.
That this could happen again in 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
Where if we fixed it now with
Right.
something,
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
So, really what's happening, the veneer hasn't been anchored back to the main masonry, or it was, and it's deteriorated over time. So that's why.
because I'm assuming this is original to the structure of
It
the,
is, and it's actually a steel frame structure, so all the blocks kind of infill, but this particular part, as balls hit it and whatever else, is coming down. So we're going back in with not glazed block, actual concrete block with anchor ties to hold it back. So I wouldn't anticipate this happening again.
okay.
It's just based on how the original construction worked, and it's over time getting hit and hit and hit. It's coming off because there's no anchors. So we talked about drywall and different options, but just the nature of the high abuse space of a gym, I mean, you'd probably be replacing that way, way quicker than what we put in now, and you get back here in 5 years dealing with drywall issues. So that we did explore a lot of those options as we looked at this.
Sure.
The other thing, Brian, I would add, just in terms of the timing, not only preparing the bid specs would be an issue, it's so late that trying to get contractors on board for summer work. If we went out to bid, I'm not even sure if we could get bids, because most of them are already booked up. So in fact, we already have someone on site
about
committed
that,
to the district who's doing a great job. They're a top-notch mason. We feel good that we can actually get someone here to get it done.
Ed, do we think that based on this, and I know you and I talked about this, based on the cost here, the fact that HAP is already mobilized, do we think that there's any potential savings that we have going on with that right now?
I do think you're getting some value here from them
Yeah.
being there. It's not, you don't have to have a second person come out and do more oversight. They already have the oversight built in. You also save on our costs because I'm not preparing all the bid documents and doing the things I normally would have to do. There's some savings there as well.
Sure.
So as far as the time frame, I mean, how much more time do they have at their project right now that would hold them back to start this project and might push this project further down the road?
So the overall project is slated to be done by start of school next year. Most of the masonry work, we're getting close to wrapping that up. There'll be some finish work and that sort of thing. Quite frankly, if we asked them to start tomorrow, they would. But we're already down a gym, using it as a cafeteria to try and put you guys out any further. We're not gonna do that, but as soon as they can get in there, they're gonna go right away. So the mason's ready to go as soon as we say go.
Okay, thank you.
Will there be consistency with how this looks? Because I mean, the other part looks amazing. So it'd be really great to see if there could be consistency in the look.
And the other part being
Like the addition when we walked it, yeah.
It's really just gonna be basic block with some paint on it.
Okay.
I mean, we could look at doing something like a burnished or what we're putting in there, but that's typically more expensive.
Okay, I just didn't know what,
Yeah,
so it.
they're doing that, what is like a glaze or a coating in the new cafeteria that
You have
looks
it down
really
here in
nice.
this cafeteria too.
Yeah.
It just adds more of a texture and color to it. We weren't doing that just because it is
Yeah.
more expensive. It's just a higher quality finish item for a gym that takes a lot of abuse.
Got it.
You know, I wouldn't recommend it.
So it'll just be like the cinder, I mean, like I just,
Basically, yeah, just painted cinder block.
oh, so it's gonna be painted, okay.
Yeah, yeah, we're
It just
not-
looked a little like,
I mean, John,
Gray.
You want to do sad.
you know what I mean? I think we're moving on past gray. I think there's a new color in town.
and
Okay.
John talked a couple weeks ago about maybe down the road even putting padding over that, like
Yeah, a lot of
what
times
happens
we have
in
wall pads in
gyms.
the
So,
gyms
you know,
for
that's
that
something we could
purpose.
look at from an aesthetic
Right.
perspective too.
Well, it does say on here, wall pads, provide new wall pads with Z-clip anchors, include cutouts for wall devices.
I think that's just at certain locations. You could do the entire.
Right.
Okay.
Where they exist now is what would be replaced.
Okay.
But this is the entire gym, correct?
Yes.
Both gyms.
Most
Right.
of the gym.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, because I was wondering if we're gonna see all cinder block and then there's gonna be some of this glazed.
Yeah,
Still?
all the glaze is coming out.
All the glaze is
All the way
coming
around
out.
the
Okay, just trying to envision it.
Goes up
Is there
about
any
8 feet.
asbestos removal with that too?
No.
Any
Okay.
concern about asbestos?
No,
Okay, well, that's great news, because,
Yeah.
that's always good news.
It's always extra, it's an extra cost.
it's always a little surprise. So,
Depends on the year. of the school.
and then for like the water fountain, like you'll do like the water bottle, I mean, I don't know what's in there now, but like the water bottle fill and that kind of thing?
It'll be an updated piece.
Perfect, okay.
Right
And
now,
then-
it's one of the older recess deals with the old spittoon and.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
1956, probably.
Yeah.
And
They
and
are.
it's
They had a
actually
good run.
related to that item right next to it, the removed temporary kitchen plumbing, what is that?
So when they got converted to run lunch out of there, new
Oh.
electrical and minor plumbing had to come in and
Okay,
set up the
sure.
fence line, which will have to come out and clear out of there. So that's
And
just
we
part
won't
of
need it because we'll be in our cafeteria.
We could keep it if you.
Not if- no. I think that's probably not ideal.
I did, oh,
No, wait, I was just, and I just think it's really important, because I think, you look at it, at a line item like this, and I think it kind of really says a lot, and I think it's really important, because I don't think a lot of people in the community always understand, it's like when you're putting something together like this, I mean, we're close to $500,000 just to redo the lower parts of a wall of a gymnasium in one of our campuses. So I just really want to reiterate, a lot of the conditions that we've been up against, I think, lately, and with the cost increases and trying to do our best to maximize the time and the people that we have here when we've got these opportunities, because it doesn't seem at this point we're seeing a real relief or break in sight on those types of costs.
A
So-
big part of that cost, it's interior to the building, you're having the carpentry in, it just, there's a lot of labor.
Yeah,
It's not
for
just
sure.
outside setup.
Right.
is it possible that any of these damages are the result of the existing construction that we're doing right now?
No, we're so far removed from that.
Okay.
It's probably been happening over a period of time. You can see where some of the grout's starting to break loose, and I'm not surprised. What happens a lot with gyms is you start throwing things at the wall.
Sure.
You're in a gym, and the walls aren't designed to take that impact. I mean, it's really designed to play basketball and volleyball.
Yeah.
Over time, that just starts to break down. So, yeah, I wouldn't.
No
have
connection.
anything related to
Okay.
construction.
And then my last question is, maybe less of a question, but just clarification. When I first started reading about this, my concern was, is this truly something that would fall under the emergency provision for us to not go to bid? I think at least the conversations that I've been having to get better understanding on this is, if we had to do this quicker than we needed to, that could potentially cause issues for kids not having a place to go. And like, we would then, if for some reason more of this came out and we had a bigger issue, is it true that there would be a serious problem with us trying to facilitate gym classes in a space that we can't use during the school year?
Yeah, I mean, we're down a gym right now, using it as a temporary cafeteria, obviously, gyms 3 and 4, so this would add to that. It would be the other gym that our physical welfare division uses. So, to our point, like, if we kick this down to the fall, I don't know how long they expecting this project will take.
I'm guessing we're gonna be anywhere from a month to 6 weeks. Is the
So 4 to 6 weeks without use of a gym in the middle of the school year would not be ideal.
Yeah. Okay.
Did we do a moisture analysis behind it to see if there was any moisture that created the vinyls from cracking?
We have not. It's interior
Okay.
walls. I wouldn't expect it, but I suppose there's potential from something maybe
Correct.
migrating down from
Right.
the top. You can certainly take a look at it. It's a good question. It'd be-
I mean, because
Pretty
if we
easy
go
to-
back to cinder blocks and it does it again,
Right.
right now try to remediate the potential risk of having to redo it again,
For
so.
sure. No, that's certainly something we can do pretty easily, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Any other questions on this?
I mean, just from a process
Yeah.
perspective, this is just a discussion
Yeah.
tonight, and then we would bring this back in 2 weeks for consideration of approval.
Right.
You took my line.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. So we will see this item again at the regular action meeting for second reading and approval. Our next item is the 2025 capital project request, first reading. Brian Stashak.
Thank you, President Alborz.
Absolutely.
So typically what we do is, as we go through the budgeting process, and we're going through that right now for the FY26 budget, so that budget that will begin July 1st of 2025 and then June 30, 2026, we seek input from staff members throughout the district. And we seek input from them on generally multiple areas, but their supply budgets, their purchase service budgets, and then capital outlay budgets, and also non-capital equipment budgets. And so what you have before you today is a list of the capital, it's either capital outlay purchases or non-capital purchases that we are recommending to be placed in the budget in FY26. So these are not for this current budget. These would be placed into next year's budget. And as you can see, there's quite a few items on there. We essentially have about $2.8 million worth of really equipment types of items on there. And we have, you'll see some that are highlighted in a light blue color. And those that are in the light blue color, essentially we'll have grant money available to cover those. Unfortunately, we don't have more grant money available to cover those. But the grants that we do have are certainly limited in the amount of money that we have, and we're trying to really put as much into there in the grants as we can. And Scott Eggerding is the one who actually does that, looks at those and says, yeah, we can get these into the grants. So it's very helpful. We'll take any amount we can get into the grants. But the remaining amounts there you see are all for those would all be attributable to essentially to district funds. And again, that $2.84 million, the total capital, and I break those out at the bottom of the page. Total capital is up about $1.1 million, and then total technology is almost $1.8 million. And so I break those down, and it just kind of gives you a quick look at what we're seeing from the district and then capital outlay. And the reason I do that is because if you recall, some of the board members have not seen this, but on my 5-year forecast, I break out the capital outlay equipment, the capital projects, and then also technology and capital equipment. So you see those line items differently there. And so that's why I'm breaking those out here. And so every year we present this to the board, not asking for approval on these tonight, but simply for review. And the one thing I would mention about this, as I do every year, is we're still early in the FY26 budgeting process. And so while these are the recommendations, as I get further into that budgeting process, I will look at that, and then, again, health insurance could be an issue next year. As I'm looking at that, we may eventually scale back some of these recommendations. But that's always been our goal, is to bring back to the board a balanced budget. And we have always utilized, the way the district is operated, is the salaries, benefits, for the most part, the supplies, purchase services, those types of things are I won't say they're locked, but the salaries and benefits are pretty much going to be locked in. The supplies we can maneuver with, purchase services, but this is another big piece here that we look at. And if we, and this plus any capital projects, if we have to look at those and reduce those potentially in cost to bring that budget more in line and in balance, that's what we'll do. And that's been the history of the district, essentially, to do that. So we'll see how this one goes. This fits in line right now with our 5-year forecast that we talked about back in March. And again, I know not everybody has seen that. But it does fit in line with that. However, the 5-year forecast did not take into account those increasing. I had some increase in insurance costs in there, but not to the degree that we're seeing right now. So something that we're going to have to obviously continue to monitor. So be happy to answer any questions on any of these.
As far as the numbers you have here, do those reflect the plus or minuses on grants, or no?
No, they don't. They're just total. And the reason I do that is because when I look at the 5-year forecast, I actually factor in the revenue into that as well. So they're both there. the revenue and the expense. So that's just a total that's
So that can
included.
change, obviously, if we get any grants going down, correct?
If the grant amount was potentially higher than what we had budgeted on the revenue side, then yes, that could change. But typically,
There aren't any other items on here that would qualify for grant
oh, that's
funding.
the other part too.
So I pulled everything that I could.
But that's why I asked if they were already, you know,
It's everything included.
that was already
Yeah.
itemized with the grants that we pulled out.
It is.
I quickly totaled it up if I did make a mistake, and it's about $78,500.
It is, that's correct.
Thank you.
And can you just remind us the priority list, how you do that?
Yeah, so going back, I forgot to mention that, thank you. Going back to the input from the staff here in the district, so principals, Dr. Tyrell, associate principals, division chairs, they talk with their staff, figure out what they're looking for, what they might need for the next year, and then they submit this in a capital request portal that we have. And then what they do is they prioritize it for us, a 1, a 2, or a 3. And so a 1 is really top priority. We kind of need this to really continue running the program for, the future year. Now, there's some subjectivity to that sort of thing. But nonetheless, we ask them to prioritize it. 2 means, this is something that we probably should replace, but we can get by for the next couple of years and we're okay. 3 is sort of, and we don't have any on here, 3 is sort of this would really be a nice to have, but if we have extra money, which I don't know, when does anybody have any extra money? But if we have extra money, we could look at utilizing those. So that's how that priority system works. And so that is prioritized by each one of the supervisors who submit this information to us, the request.
Thank you.
And when you guys mended, we get to see it, what the stuff that was mended out of the.
I would bring it back to the board.
Okay.
We haven't had to do that,
Right.
but if we did, I would certainly bring it back to the board and say, here's what we removed.
Okay.
And we would have conversations with the division chairs and kind of figure out where we could go from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I just had another follow-up to that. Some of these items are furniture related. And please let me know if this is outside of the scope, but do we, as part of the potential funding process, grants is one thing, but do we look at partnership opportunities, like with furniture companies, with lab equipment companies, things along those lines, so that we can create some kind of a co-op funding
Yeah.
opportunity?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the answer to that is the majority of our furniture, the things that you see here, we purchase from a purchasing co-op.
Okay.
And so instead of us going out to bid all of this, right? The purchasing co-op has already bid all of this, and they have the pricing on there. That is the bid pricing that they submitted. So we are using those purchasing cooperatives to buy a lot of the furniture items on here.
Would any potential Fortune 500 donate?
That would be great.
Do we have
comes
a,
up every
I'm just
couple
wondering,
years
if do
maybe.
we
Yeah.
have that kind of capability of somebody to kind of reach out and create those types of partnerships?
Well, we certainly could. We have not done that in the past with any companies. It's certainly something I suppose we could do. But it isn't something that we've done in the past, reaching out for,
And I don't want to
donations.
add work, I just was curious if we kind of
Sure.
had the possibility of thinking along those
See if
lines.
there are programs where the companies would
yeah.
donate.
Like donate new stuff.
New stuff,
Not,
yeah.
yeah, not yes.
Not like we're moving and
Yeah.
here we go,
Not
we
going
just
down that
adopted
road.
it.
Yeah, no,
Get,
no, new.
old
Yeah.
equipment, squeaky equipment.
Brian, on this list, do you know how much of this is replacing existing or just adding? Any idea?
Usually, it's a good question. We have items on here where we look at, a lot of the furniture is replacement, for example, okay? 'Cause-
So, and the reason for that question is there anything that is usable still that could be like a garage sale type of, that you can get revenue from, or is it just all gonna be disposed of?
Yeah, so what happens a lot of times is what we can do with some of these things is if they're still usable, we can repurpose some of them in some situations. Many times, A lot of it is either damaged and really just kind of needs to go out because it's been in the district for 50 years or, something along those lines. And so that's typically what we've done with it. If we have something that's a larger lot of something that we can sell, we'll look to potentially, sell it to another school district, that type of thing, provided that it's still usable. We'll look at that. We're probably going to end up doing that with the current cafeteria tables we have at South Campus, because those are currently in the temporary cafeteria, and we're ordering new tables for the new cafeteria. So the existing ones, we're gonna look to potentially sell those to whoever else may want those.
A lot of the curricular stuff is due to growth.
That
growth
too.
in our
Expansion.
Television program, offering yoga at South Campus, the new furnishings in the areas that we are now building, and then also even in some of our programmatic changes for our special ed programming, really changing furniture there. And then wear and tear, we've got lab stools and we've got, things that, there's not, when I look through this too, just on the curricular side, there's not a whole lot in there. You're going, oh, we could reuse those old guitars. So.
We can restring those.
No. And just grant-wise too, you can't use grants for anything that you've purchased already with district money. So when I look at that, I've got to make sure that it's something we've already used grants for. Or it's an expansion, for example, the additional 3D printer, and the drill press, that's expanding in an area, so.
Yeah, we have roughly 250 classrooms in the district, and many of them have the old school traditional desks. The classrooms have not been modernized, so, we have a desire to, over time, purchase more modern, flexible furniture for those spaces. And so I can't remember what we have in there this year, Brian. Is it 10 classrooms worth or 15 classrooms worth? And so
Yeah.
you can see how long that's going to take at that clip to change that over. And, I think, is it 15 grand a classroom or so for the
About 16,000.
16,000 per classroom, times 225 to 250 classrooms,
There were requests well beyond that.
Right. So that's the whole other discussion, but the whole classroom modernization piece is something that we are passionate about wanting to accomplish here at some point.
It has been in a strategic
Yep.
plan.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
and looking at the categories that you really can line them right back to the strategic
Yeah.
plan and all. It's got a nice balance, for lack of a better word, but between athletics and fine arts and our special ed program and life safety updates and some of those types of things. So it's pretty expansive, and it's covering a lot of categories that align with the plan. So will these items then be something that would be available then to our school community in the fall?
Yes.
Plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
so once the board approves them, then again, I still hold off because I want to look at that budget, right? And I want to see what's there. And so that's why we asked the board to approve them in May. Again, with the caveat that, hey, look, as we go through May and June and July, then I look at that and I say, okay, where are we? And then we would make some changes to that potentially, going forward. If we did, again, we would bring that back to the board and share that with the board. But then, once we're good with the budget, then we say, go ahead, everybody who ordered, here's the items that were approved, go ahead and get them ordered. And then they order those.
The question for this one too, as far as some of the stuff that we were to order, is there a waiting time frame that we have to wait for deliveries on that stuff? Or that's another thing we have to consider too, depending on when we approve this budget here, to make sure we approve it in time, so we don't have to sit and wait for that product to come in, so.
Right, so once I'm comfortable with the budget,
Okay,
then I will tell the division chairs, go ahead and go do that.
got it.
Right, because the board has already approved this, right? And then once I'm comfortable with the budget, then I say, okay, go ahead and start ordering. So you're correct, there is a wait time for delivery on these. And so we just kind of have to, move on them as quickly as we can. I don't know, Ed, are you going to order, we usually order the Chromebooks pretty soon, right?
Yes.
For that purpose, so that we have them for, the start of the school year, and making sure that we're we have them ready to go for the students when they come in on that first day, right?
Yeah, that order was placed, we do it at the end of the year for the following.
Right.
Be ahead of the
Right.
curve.
Perfect. I just want to make sure we're not waiting on stuff.
Sure, no.
But that, Elias, that May timeframe helps with that, so.
That's
Yes.
what I wanna make
Discussion
sure we're-
tonight,
Right.
if we get it approved 2 weeks
Perfect.
from now, then that gives us time
Yeah.
to order and have things ready for the fall.
And the Chromebook is kind of a good example because that is sort of the district initiative for the one-to-one, right? So
Yeah.
we can't wait on that and then have freshmen come in August and we don't have Chromebooks for them till October. That doesn't make any sense.
Thank you.
Sure.
With supply chain issues potentially and tariffs being a big,
That's one of the reasons why my numbers are up.
okay,
Trying to be responsible
Yeah.
to Brian. It seems like it's changing every other day.
of course, right?
And I can tell you that the live time of a quote is getting much shorter.
Shorter than normal, yeah.
So they're only willing to commit
30 days.
for example, the ones we ordered this spring, we actually got a vendor to honor last year's pricing if we ordered by the end of that month.
Okay.
So we had about a 2-week period to make a decision on that.
Yeah. And Ed and I did talk about that tariff pricing. That's one of the, I think the supply chain has been okay, right?
It's been better.
Yeah.
right.
It's more the tariff pricing this year that we've been concerned about.
We're not,
We also fall into a sweet spot often, given the number of units we need. We need a lot of units compared to some schools, but we need a lot less units than many major organizations need. And so sometimes we fall into that sweet spot where a particular manufacturer, particular vendor has an overage from another project or something like that. And will those devices meet the specs that we need? And then we can slide in and ride somebody else's deal. Sometimes that works.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the only other thing I wanted to add, just to mention again for that, from a historical perspective, Brian, when we look at these numbers, we're pretty much in line with what we usually see every year, correct?
That's correct. Well, and yeah, what I'm going to do is I will provide at the May meeting, again, this is just a first look. At the May meeting, I will give you essentially what I created a spreadsheet where I look at the dollars by the divisions and give you sort of a 5-year look back at what they have purchased in those prior 5 years, and then bring that forward to this year so you can kind of see what that historical perspective looks like.
Thank you. That's
Sure.
helpful.
Any other questions? Okay. Again, we will see this item at the regular action meeting for second reading and approval. Our next, this is the Brian Stashak show for sure today. And a lot of work, so I want to thank you in advance for everything that you guys have been you and your team have been putting forward. But the next item is our first reading of the transportation bid contract discussion. Brian Stashak.
Thank you, President Alboris. So what I just want to do tonight is give you a brief update on where we are in our regular ed transportation contract bidding process. Just so everybody knows, we went to bid opened up bids in the beginning of March for, again, this is for our regular ed transportation. We have 2 contracts. We have one with First Student for regular ed transportation and one with Grand Prairie for special ed transportation. So this is the one for First Student and the regular ed transportation. And so just to give you, the reason we went to bid is there was a law change that was effective in January of 2024. And we used to be able to have a contract with a transportation company, and you could turn it over, after so many years, you could turn it over every year unless another company came along and asked you to go to bid. The new law, as of January 1st of 2024, said that you could go for up to 10 years, and then you had to bid it, then you have to bid it again. And you could go for up to 15 if the majority of the bus fleet was electric, okay? So we're not in that electric category, and besides, we've been with First Student for many years, way more than 10. So it was the recommendation of legal counsel that we go to bid on this, for this particular contract. And so we did that. We opened the bids on March 4th, and just a little bit more perspective on this. It was a bid that was for 11 districts, including us. Why did we go with 11 districts? Because with the Hodgkins facility at First Student, they serve all 11 districts out of that facility. The advantage here is that many of our routes are paired. So just to give you an example, we have an early start time here at, really first bell at 7:40 and then class starting at 7:45. So our buses are dropping off here around 7:20, 7:25, 7:30, somewhere in that area. And because they're so early, they can then head out to other districts and run those routes for them. Because maybe their starting time is 8:30, whatever the case may be. And so with those pairings, when that happens, we are only paying for half of the route that day, which is a real benefit to us and the feeder districts. And actually, it even extends beyond the feeder districts. Some of the routes between us and Argo end up out in Oak Lawn Hometown 123, Ridgeland School District 122, which is also part of Oak Lawn. So they end up Burbank 111. So it's not just feeder districts, but districts that we pair with. So the 11 districts got together and we said, look, we want to try to keep that in place, that pairing, because if we go out there individually and we start getting picked off by, an individual company here and there, what potentially could happen is that you could see a lower route cost, but still end up paying more because now you're paying for the entire route. And so we kept all 11 districts together, and that's how we wrote the bid spec essentially, so that we would maintain those pairings. The part about this, it's a little frustrating, of course, is that we only received one bidder. It would, in today's market, I can tell you, when I first started doing this a long time ago, 24 years ago, there were different size transportation companies. There were sort of local companies, then there were regionals, and then there were the larger conglomerate companies. Pretty much the regionals and the locals are all gone. They've all sort of kind of been bought up by these larger companies. And the way that it's working right now is, these companies have sort of regionalized themselves, like First Student here at the Hodgkins facility. And it would be very difficult for a company to come in and then outbid First Student when they have startup costs that are going to be rather high. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think at the First Student location there, they have about 100 buses. So the first thing you'd have to do is you'd have to acquire 100 buses, or you'd have to have 100 buses lying around, which bus companies don't do. And at about $120,000 a bus, that's going to be rather costly. That's a cost that First Student doesn't have to contend with. The other piece of this is that, we want a company who's going to provide services in this area to have a location, a facility in this area, right? So a bus depot in this area, because it doesn't make sense for us to sign a contract and then the buses are coming from Highland Park, let's say. We're probably setting ourselves up for failure there with late routes and all that sort of thing. So you typically ask for a location somewhere within sort of a radius of all the districts that we talked about, so that you're able to provide the services. So where do you find that? I don't know. It's kind of difficult to do that. And so really, we kind of knew that going into this, that there's an advantage for First Student, as there would be for any other company in the current districts that they're in. Because again, for all the reasons that I just mentioned. And so ultimately, First Student came in, and again, the way that we had written the bid specifications, that we said, look, give us your costs for the first year, an increase for the first year, and then we were going to limit that to the consumer price index for 4 more years after that as a 5-year contract. So whatever your cost was in that first year, then next year, if the CPI is 2.5%, that's what they would get, is 2.5%. And that would continue on for the next 5 years. So that was how we specified this. When First Student came back with their bid, they were looking for a 21% increase in the first year. Again, we had kind of known that was going to happen based on, again, market conditions, right? When you don't have much competition, then that can happen. Ultimately, we've been going back and forth with First Student since the March date, the 11 districts, kind of talking with them. We have the ability to negotiate with them because they are the lowest bidder, technically, and only bidder. And so we've been going back and forth with them. We've talked with them about the potential of bringing that 21% down in the first year, and then maybe some sort of guaranteed increases in the future year that would be higher than the CPI, maybe 5%, something along those lines. And every time we've done that, it hasn't, they have said, sure, we can give you this here, this number, 12.5% in the first year, and then here's what we're looking for in the future years. And every time they've done that, it is kind of come out in the fifth year higher than what it would be if we just went with the 21%, and then, even if we guaranteed them 3% in future years, that would be a higher payment to us in the fifth year. So that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense at that point to say, sure, let's lower this, but then pay you more in the long run. And so right now, basically, we went back to First Student last week. We sent them I guess, sort of a counteroffer, if you will, and we said, look, we've tried to work with you. We've told you what our concerns are. At this point, we're ready to go back to the 21 and the CPI numbers, and we take the contract and we go. And so we've not heard a response from them yet. So again, that's kind of where we are. I have the information here, and you can kind of see what we'd be expecting in the 21% increase on our route costs, on the unpaired and the paired routes, and then also potentially what that might look like in terms of an increase to the district in the first year. But what I can tell you is that over the course of these 5 years, we would anticipate that just by the numbers, the 21%, and let's say, CPI was 2.5 to 3%, somewhere in that ballpark. Let's say it was 3. And they get 3 for those next years. It would be 12 plus the 21, so you're at a 33% increase in terms of just the percentages. Now the dollars, because they're front loading, it's going to be a little bit more on the backside. But we are essentially coming off the last 5 years of about 30, I think it's 31 to 32% with them. So even though the number in the first year is higher, ultimately the percentage-wise, we would be about the same of what we're coming off of from the last 5 years. So that being said, our hope is that we would have a contract together with First Student. Obviously, I don't think May at this point is going to be a good timeline, but I would hope that we'd have something together with them for June, and then we would bring that back to the board. And then, of course, I would obviously make aware of what the final increases were. But I think right now, as it stands, we're going to be back at the 21 and probably 3%, or the CPI going forward. That being said, be happy to answer any questions on this for you.
As far as consistency with the routes, some of them make the routes, some don't. I know that at a previous district where I was at, we were compensated back for some of those routes that never made. Is that going to be part of the literature you guys are drafting?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, we have not penalty clauses, but they are called performance clauses.
Thank you.
And we're doing that now.
We are doing that now,
Yeah.
too.
And in the new contract.
Right, yeah,
Thank you.
they're in both of those.
I just want to for the new members, just like we had talked about this so many times in the past, because it's really unfortunate that there really is one option. I mean, even to the point where, we had talked about it as a board about even, employing our own buses, doing something like that, and none of it really seems feasible. You know what I mean? And
Bless you.
That's a good point.
I mean, just to,
Yeah.
just to give that background, because it is really unfortunate that there are not many options out there,
Yeah,
and that this is where we're at. So I appreciate you trying to negotiate it, and
yeah.
I had a
And
lot of hope there were some other options, 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
We
2
always
years.
wondered, right? We
We
always
always did.
wondered, and the legislation changed. We had to bid it out. We bid it out, and we ended up with one bid.
There's
And-
been multiple times that we've had, this isn't just the first time with that.
Right,
So I just wanted
right.
to give,
Yeah.
just a little bit of information on that. I don't know
Yeah.
if that would be helpful to you all.
Yeah, and again, we'll see what their response is. I don't know what their response will be after we went through this for the last, almost 2 months. And we'll see what their response, what they come back with. And again, Jill, to your point, you say, well, what about going to our own buses? Okay. We still have to find a location for all these buses. We have to have a bus depot. We now have to have, probably 30 to 40 buses that we would have to purchase. And Then you have additional staff, when you talk about bus mechanics, a transportation coordinator, all of those people. I came from my prior district, we had our own buses, and generally speaking, this is kind of how it's looked at. If you have your own buses, you run your own schedule, that's the advantage. But it costs you quite a bit more money to do that. And if you go with a contracted service, you may not have as much flexibility, but generally it's going to be cheaper than running your own transportation.
So what would happen if we decided that we no longer wanted to stay with these other 10 districts? And we said, we're gonna go out and bid on our own
Yeah.
and try and get a better contract from a different company, right? What would happen there?
Well, again, there is the possibility at that point that, let's say somebody comes and picks us or another, district off. Now we start to lose those pairings. And when we lose those pairings, you could potentially see a lower route cost, but still end up paying more because you're not splitting that route anymore with the cost with another district. So it's possible that that could happen.
We could get more offers from other companies, but it would probably still get us less or higher costs.
So you may, but again, the problem that we still run into is the fact that we don't want our buses coming from Arlington Heights.
Right.
Right? So if another company was to come in, they would have to have some location that's obviously much closer to where we are. First Student has a location in Hodgkins, which is where we are served from. And then there's one just west of here, I forget, but I'd have to look to see if any other companies had anything else that would make sense to service. But that's the potential downside of that. Sure, you could see some better rates, but then you have to look in and say, okay, are we still paired, and what does that actual cost come to?
My only concern, and I don't think there's anything we can do about it, is we have no leverage. I mean, this is, they can,
Yeah.
what scares me is when you say that we went back to the original 21, you haven't got an answer. It's like, why haven't they answered you? If
Yeah.
that was their original, and everything else was higher for us in the long run, so are they going back and saying, okay, we've got them, so instead of 21, we'll do 25 to start?
No, they can't do that.
Okay,
No, they can't do that because they did bid the 21.
okay.
So in the bidding process, they came in with the 21, and essentially, with the way we wrote the bid spec, that ultimately becomes the contract. So you bid on the 21, and really, I should be clear that when we told them we were going back to this, I'm not necessarily expecting a response from them because it's the contract, right? That's what they bid on. I'm not expecting a response from them to say, no, we don't want to do that, right? Because that's what they bid on. They don't really have a choice
Okay.
at this point. So if they come back with anything, we would be curious to see if they would come back and rearrange their numbers again, but I don't think they're going to do that. So they would be locked in at the 21, and then the CPI numbers going forward. And again, we're talking about a 5-year contract here.
And over that time, you're thinking 35% total increase?
Probably in that ballpark.
I mean,
Which would be consistent with what we had the last 5 years.
Yeah.
and then another 5 years on top of that, I mean, but I can't believe their costs are going up that much.
I can tell you that their biggest issue has been, in the last 5 years since COVID, personnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have, I don't know exactly what they've raised their starting rate to, but it has gone up quite a bit since COVID. And for probably 4 of those years after that, they were really having a hard time staffing, full staffing their staff. We've gotten to a point now where I think they're in terms of their staffing, they're in pretty good shape, which is good. But I do know that their salary, their hourly rates have come up. I want to say it's probably at least $4 or $5 an hour, maybe more than that over those years. They might be doing some additional benefits, sign-on bonuses, all of those types of things. And so I think that's where the majority of their cost is landing. Their increases.
Hopefully slows down a bit.
I mean, it's some really difficult years, 20, 21, 22, when we were back to busing, 22, 23. they've gotten incrementally better each year, but
Yeah.
it was probably the slowest recovery from the pandemic of any,
Other
service
issue that we
provider, or
had.
any other issue we
Yeah.
had was bus service.
See the incremental increases be more in the 35% over
Yeah.
a 5-year range.
Exactly.
And Brian, did they talk to you at all about any chance or any conversations about updating their fleet since there is such a push for electric vehicles?
Yeah, they asked us about that, and, they said, are you guys opposed to us going over, looking at electric buses? And we put in the actual documentation, in the bid specification, that we have no issue with that whatsoever. They are free to seek grants or anything that they can get to bring in electric buses.
Okay, but it
So-
won't affect or the terms and conditions of our contract?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, it won't. I suppose let's put it this way, if they were able to turn over the entire fleet in 5 years or 4 years from now, which probably isn't going to happen, we have a fuel peg in here, it's called. And so what we say is, look, give us your bid based on a range of fuel, because that's going to happen. And then we say, if it's above that, you can add a surcharge to that, and if it's below it, you give us a credit for that, right? So we have to maintain looking at their invoices and that sort of thing. Now, if they went over to an electric fleet and some of that changed, we would probably address that with them. I don't know that they're going to have any sort of a substantial change in bus fleet. The unfortunate part, I mentioned earlier, I think a regular diesel burning bus, 72 passenger bus, I think is about $120,000, and I think those electric buses are at least almost double that, unfortunately. Now, I'm saying that, and I've seen some of the costs, but I haven't really memorized them, but I know they're more expensive than the diesel burning buses at this point.
Well, for the committee that works with the students and the driving, thank you guys, because I know that is one of the toughest, to try to get their kids to get the right education that they need, try to get them here, so, thank you guys.
Yeah, that's really,
Important service.
yeah, that's really a credit to Dr. Tyrell, Greg Gardner, and Sarah Smith here, because they really do a lot of the work with First Student and making sure that things are running on time and smoothly.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Greg.
Yeah.
Transportation liaison.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, hopefully, I don't know about May. I think May is doubtful at this point, but the hope would be to have a contract to come back in June. And
If we
if,
do finalize it by May 19th, we'll bring it back.
Bring it back.
and talk about it. If not, we'll kick it to June.
yeah, and we can also give an update at the committee of the whole in June, too.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, hopefully we can get a contract out then would be great, but let's see how that goes.
All right, any last questions, comments, concerns? All right, this is our final item for finance. First reading of food services bid contract discussion. Mr. Station.
Real quickly before we jump, I just want to kind of say to the board here, we were planning until about 8 hours ago to have the
Right.
same conversation around food service as we did with transportation, but we actually got the contract today, so that's why we scrambled at the last minute to share it with you guys. Invited Nick here as well from Quest. Thought we'd have a more extensive discussion, kind of see where this goes tonight. This is a contract where if we get questions answered and there's some comfort level, we could bring this back on May 19th. This is definitely a transition that I'm probably more concerned about, because with busing, we've had first student, we're gonna have first student next year. There's not gonna be really a transition to start the year. But we're currently using Sodexo as a cafeteria provider, and bringing in a new cafeteria provider is something we'd love to have a little more time for. So that's why we kind of wanted to scramble and bring it tonight. And with that, I'll kind of turn over to Brian to go through all the important information.
Well, yeah, that covered the background information there in terms of what we're looking for here. So we did go to an RFP, request for proposal, for our food service management company. The district has been with Sodexo for a long time. Even back before Sodexo, or I should say before it became Sodexo, it was Marriott Food Services a long time ago. And so the district has been with Sodexo for an extended period of time. And we felt it was time for us to go to an RFP, to look to see what's out there, lock in sort of a contract, going forward. And so this essentially is what we'll be looking at a 5-year contract, and then we could roll that over, in future years as we go. And so on March 27th, we had opened up the RFPs, the requests for proposal, and essentially we began evaluating those from that point. We went through the evaluation process. We had three. We had three that were provided, three proposals provided to the district, one by the incumbent Sodexo, one from Organic Life, and then one from Quest. And so we began evaluating those proposals. I have in your document here, I have the Schedule G that was part of the actual RFP documents that provided the financial information to the district on what essentially the district would be looking at potentially in returns from the program. And so let me just give you I'm going to try to do this briefly. There are two types of programs that you can essentially be involved with. One is the National School Lunch Program, and the other is you're not on the National School Lunch Program, okay? We are not on the National School Lunch Program. The reason that you would want to be on the National School Lunch Program is because you have a high percentage of free lunch, students who qualify for free lunch. And so ultimately, what ends up happening with that is you go to bid on that service, and really what it comes down to is what a food service management company is going to sell you a free lunch for, and then how much reimbursement you receive from the federal government, okay? So it's much more advantageous and beneficial for a district with a higher percentage of students on their free program or reduced program to be on the National School Lunch Program, again, when that percentage is higher. When you're on that program, you are severely restricted in the other items that you can sell, okay? We are not on that program because we typically see about 12% of our students who qualify for the free lunch program. So in essentially for running our food service program, it is more advantageous for us to run our a la carte lines and obviously sell to the students. And then the district has always paid for the free lunches. And that's essentially how we're continuing to run this program under what potentially would be this new contract. And so that just gives you a little history of why you'd be on the program and why you wouldn't be on the program, okay? And so we are not on the program, nor are we looking to do that here at this particular point. And so in the evaluation process, we looked at naturally the financial proposals. In addition to that, looked at, we had information from when the food service companies turned in their proposals to us. We were asking for financial information, letters of recommendation from existing districts, existing clients. So we're looking through all that, evaluating that. In addition, back in April, we actually had a student taste testing. We brought in all three companies, had a student taste testing. We had 19 students. We had initially 20. Then we divided those students up into three groups, and they were actually able to rotate through and then taste all of the different vendors. And I told them, I said, look, you can't just go nutty on the first one and then not save room for the other two, because we need to get a great assessment from you all the way around, right? And so they looked at me and said, okay, yeah, we won't do it. And then at the end I said, anybody eat themselves sick? And a few hands went up. Okay, great. But they had a ton of fun. They really enjoyed it. And then we asked them for, right then and there, for feedback on essentially, a Google survey. They gave us that feedback, and we used that as part of the evaluation process as well. And then, of course, there was enough food for staff members to head down and then try some of that as well, because the vendors really did a nice job of bringing all that food in for everybody. So we've kind of looked at all of those factors, and essentially right now, what has occurred is that Quest has risen to the top of our recommendation list. And what's really, as I'm looking at the financial proposal, what's important here from the perspective of pointing that out is that essentially what they're doing is Quest is basically saying, look, for the sales, right? So your sales, we're going to take 88.5% of those to run our business, right? And our profit and everything else included. And so the other 12.5%, no, 11.5%, sorry, 11.5%, they are going to, that's going to be returned to the district, okay? And so essentially, just to give you an idea how that works, if we had $1 million in sales, they would take $885,000 of that, and we would have, the rest would remain with the district. However, what they have done in their proposal is they have given us two options. They've said, well, not so much options, but two numbers. They've said, look, here's what we believe we can give you as an anticipated return based on sales, and here's what we are going to guarantee you in terms of a return on your work with Quest. So regardless of the sales, over the 5-year period, Quest has basically said, look, we're going to give the district $1,050,000 over 5 years. And if the sales are better than those numbers, they will still continue to take the 88.5%, and we'll get the money will be returned to the district even at a higher potential rate based on the sales. Quest and Nick, I think you would say that you have said that you believe you can grow the participation. You have a plan for growing the participation in that program. And so that's really where they're looking at these numbers and saying, look, we really think we can do some neat things here in the district, grow your participation, and then get back some of that revenue in the hands of the district. Again, because we don't have the reimbursement revenue coming from the National School Lunch Program. So that's the difference there. I did provide you with the other two schedules, G from the two other additional companies. They were, again, they both had some nice numbers in there for us. But at this point, Quest would essentially rise to the top with that. Be happy to answer any questions on this. As Dr. Waterman said, this is a change that has not happened here in quite some time. And so it is something that we would have to look at. I have talked with Nick and his team, and they believe that, we're going to, they'd be up and running, and it wouldn't be an issue at all. So that being said, be happy to answer questions on any of the information here.
All right, so I have a few. So one, I'm going to say first, I love that you engaged all the students in the taste test. So that's a very big positive. I think
Yeah.
that's fun. I know when we were talking about building the cafeteria, was it, like we talked about how to be more efficient, because that was a concern for the kids about how long it took to go. And then we had talked about having to be where you put your tray down and it scans everything. Will that be something that would be implemented? You know, like how,
Nick, do you want to come up to the podium?
so like, when you go
Thank you.
like to the United Center and you want to get food and you put your tray in, so it's quick to easy to keep them moving through. How,
Yes, not standing in line.
So the point of sale system belongs to the district. So if we were to implement something like that, we would have to look at some change of our technology along with a partnership with Quest in that process as well.
Okay.
And so that is not part of this
Okay.
right now. It's certainly, I don't know, Nick, are there any districts that are doing that right now?
So K-12 point-of-sale systems are like one step above an abacus when it comes to food service.
Okay.
So the real big challenge with the K-12 point-of-sale systems, if you go to like the United Center technology they use, MassGen, stuff like that, those systems don't work with declining balance systems, which is what K-12 point-of-sale systems are
Got
all
it,
based
okay.
on, right? Where you put your money, I put money on my own student's account, and
Yeah.
then they draw down on that. They only run that through gift cards. So the K-12, that entire arena for technology like that, or just walk out technology like Amazon has, it really has a hard time managing the declining balance stuff. And so I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just not easy.
and that's not
easily
something
found.
you offer, or anybody offer at this, really at this time, it sounds like.
I think your bigger question, though, is can we make the lunch lines faster?
Yeah.
Like,
Right, I
that's
mean,
really
that's really
the
the
question
concern. I
is,
mean,
are
that
there
was-
some efficiencies where we've struggled
Yeah.
with,
One of
we have
the
a
ways.
25-minute lunch period. We want to get kids through the lunch
Sure.
line faster. So can you talk to that?
Yeah, for sure. So
Nick,
first off-
before you do that, let me
Yeah, go
just say
ahead.
one thing. We do have the majority of our students are currently, we're not generally taking cash in the lines. It is credited to their account. Parents go in, put, money in the account, and then as we're talking about, it's deducting from the account. So it is efficient in terms of moving the kids through the paying piece, but we don't have something where, you could just put it down.
Okay, because I know that was like a pipe dream when we
Yeah.
did the cafeteria and we laid that out.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if we were there then.
No, so like I said, that's, the majority of our students are paying with those, with that credit line that they have where the parents go in and put money on. So it does move them through quickly. But Nick, you can kind of talk about what other efficiencies we might be able to gain there.
Sure. So first, hi, I'm Nick Sakara. I'm the president at Quest. I'm not going to give you a long commercial about Quest, but just really quick, we're in Lombard, so we're just down the road here. We've been around since '85. We've got about 135 schools and school districts that we work with. Almost our entire focus is K-12. And most of the schools that we work with here in Chicagoland, places like New Trier, Glenbrook, Hinsdale, Highland Park, Deerfield, Libertyville, Vernon Hills, like they're peer schools of yours. So this is kind of our sweet spot, if you will. From an efficiency standpoint, there's a few things I'd bring up. Number one of the things that we've talked quite a bit about in the program that we, in our recommendations, we see this every time we walk into high school campuses. Grab and go options are significantly underrepresented for students. They're super busy, right? We know it, in some of our schools, kids are scheduled school through lunch. They've got stuff going on all day long. So what we like to have, and one of the things that we're so excited about with the South Campus, and we have worked closely with the designer at the South Campus at other facilities, so we kind of know what we're likely to get there. The ability to have something open all day long for students to be able to come and get, and not just have to come during their lunch period. If they want to come during a passing period, a study hall, et cetera, and get some grab and go options that we've made healthy, fresh on site, that will absolutely be a staple of the program, number one. Number two, we are piloting mobile ordering right now at another couple of schools. So it's not the same as set your tray down and scan it, but it is another way that students can use a device to place an order ahead of time and get something to go. And places that we're specifically looking at are long line stations like a deli or panini station that students often want a lot of customization and take a long time, but are often super popular. And the cafes where students might have drinks, smoothies, et cetera, that are made to order. So that's another thing that we're doing from a pilot standpoint. I think there's a real, and Loyola Academy just popped into my head when we were talking about the 25-minute lunch periods. When we started at Loyola, they had over 40-minute lunch periods. They went down to 25-minute lunch periods. A real hallmark of what we like to do is a lot of customization so that students with allergy concerns, or students who might be vegetarians, religious restrictions, et cetera, really have the option to kind of customize what they're doing. And we've found ways to sort of start the entree or the meal. So for example, I'm just going to give you an example. We might have a burrito bowl station where we might have some burrito bowls made that might have some of the different proteins in them, and then we're just topping them as the students go through, versus building them completely from scratch from the minute they walk in the door. At the end of the day, we've got to get the place staffed. We have over 2,000 employees. We've run less than an 8% vacancy rate this entire school year. You were talking about the bus drivers, and that was like ringing in my head about what that looks like. I think the district will see a real significant investment on our end in terms of staff, number of cashiers, et cetera, to help get kids through the line as quickly as possible.
So, thank you for that. That
Sure.
sounds great. How does this cost compare to the other ones? Because, I mean, my concern is the cost that we're passing on to the families and the children of that. And I personally am having trouble, although we've just come off of how much we're spending and what we need the income, but I'm personally having trouble reconciling how we make money off of what we're having people eat at school when we're not using those opportunities to monetize things within the district. You know, I mean, this is obviously a greater subject than, conversation that I know you can't answer, but like such as our billboard and things like that. I guess I'm just having trouble reconciling how are we going to we're making a profit off of this when it's going to be a cost to the family. And that's where I guess I'm concerned.
So
that was a lot in that sentence.
Yeah, so we've had that conversation, and essentially right now, part of the bid, the proposal, the RFP that we sent out had our current pricing in it. So what students are currently paying for all the items that, would be available at some point or other. They're not necessarily available every day, but Tuesdays, whatever the case may be. And when I had the conversation with Quest about that, they actually say that we're priced appropriately at this point for where we are. And so we don't look, over time, the pricing goes up and that naturally happens. But there isn't some, large increase that's coming to the price, to the individual prices of the items that we currently have.
But even with that being said, that there's no increase, I mean, we're not passing that savings along, because that is a thing that we've heard about, the price. I mean, I love to hear that you're in line with where we currently are, but how do we know, like when we're looking at the bus things, how do we know that you will be in line next year? That there won't be,
So the district has we cannot raise prices
Right.
on our own. The district has to approve all final pricing. It's in the contract, that the district approves all pricing.
well, that would come back to us as a board then to approve any increases in the prices?
I don't think it. I
No,
don't
we
think
have done that.
Wouldn't be the board, but the district could.
I mean, let's just talk, I mean, like, a slice of pizza is, I don't know, I'm just throwing out $3, is that even appropriate?
Ballpark.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the price of pizza is $3, okay? But then all of a sudden, next year, it's raised to $4, and all of a sudden, we're making an extra $250,000 for the year. I'm having trouble reconciling the profit aspect of this.
Right.
So when you run the food service, ultimately, we're looking at the pricing every year. And essentially, our goal with the food service isn't to maximize profit. It truly is to provide the students with a good lunch at a reasonable cost. And in the past, when I've looked at the pricing with Sodexo, our goal is to not raise prices at all. However, there are times when you have to do it, and so, you look at certain items and you make a recommendation to say, look, this probably needs to go up 25 cents because dairy costs have increased, something along those lines. So there is no intent there to make $1 million off of students and families and that sort of thing. You certainly do have to take, in the course of running your food service, you still have replacement items. You have, there's certainly for the district, there's the cost of running the program. And then you have running the food service management and all that sort of thing with Quest. But then, of course, we have all of our equipment that we have to maintain, that we have to replace at
Okay,
times.
that makes me feel like, so they're using,
Yeah.
I just need to
There's
reconcile, I just don't know how
Yeah.
we can just say, hey, this is a quote-unquote a fundraiser.
No.
So, do you know what I'm saying? So
It's-
really, and ultimately,
Yeah.
it's not a it's to cover the cost of it. So that makes me feel like we're in a better position. 'cause
Correct.
With that,
We typically see schools that are allocating utility costs, janitorial costs, equipment replacement costs, smallwares, pots, pans, those kinds of things, et cetera, costs, like all of those kinds of things typically get netted out against the return that we're providing the school.
okay, well, that is like a total, I so appreciate that, because I was like, I just was like, oh my God, here's our fundraiser.
Suddenly suddenly making.
We've solved our,
tons of money off of
I'm sorry if I'm jumping in too much.
Oh,
but
no, I appreciate it.
As we looked at the pricing that was provided in the RFP, it's fine. But as we we evaluate sales at schools like this on a per capita basis, so revenue per student per day, so that we can compare how this district might be performing relative to St. Charles or Highland Park Deerfield or Glenbrook or whatever the case might be. And as we look at some of comparable schools that we serve, our per capita for very comparable pricing at Glenbrook, as an example, is 180% higher than what it is here at Lyons Township High School.
Where is that on the, am I missing it on the sheet?
It was in the proposal
Contract.
itself.
Yeah, if you look, you won't have you'll have comparisons down there, and so if you.
Okay.
Glenbrook, you said Glenbrook, right?
Glenbrook.
Yeah. So if you look on the Schedule G,
Got
that
it.
is for Quest Food Management, is it 57?
I've got 57 of the packet.
Yeah.
Okay, I
that's
just
what
want to make sure we're all
57.
like looking at. okay.
Yeah. So,
They're all displayed up
Nick,
there.
you want to just kind
There it
of
is.
walk them through
Stuff on
that?
the screen
Yeah,
too,
sure.
so probably a little small, but
Oh,
Much
you
easier.
got a copy there, yeah.
Yeah, so if we look at this per capita in here in the mid fours, look at Hinsdale's in the high threes, District 113 in the high threes, St. Charles in the low threes. Right now, from the sales data that we provided, your district is around $1.70 per student per day. So
So
as-
under I, when we're looking at I,
That's it.
Yep.
Okay, I in that column.
That-
So we're much lower than anybody
G
else.
and
G.
I.
G and
Yeah.
I,
G is
both of
really
them.
Two different years. G is 1
G's
year,
the
I'm sorry, I haven't written. G is 23, 24, and I is 22, 23, I think it was.
Right, that's correct.
So you're much lower, even though the pricing is very comparable to these other districts. So we look at, you know, why is that? And from our perspective, it's all about, as Brian mentioned, how do we provide a really great experience for the students, or as great as we can in a school environment? We do this sort of thing, this is our area of focus versus sort of a, you know, it's not just like a sort of division of our business, this is our area of focus, and we think we know how to do this really well in these kinds of environments with the kinds of students that are here.
Okay, I mean, I think this is all so helpful to understand. So really, we're coming in at a much lower cost, so that when somebody says the prices went up, and like, because that's a really valid question for a family to ask. I mean, it would be, what I would be asking if it was I was buying my kids lunch, you know, hearing that we're making so much money a year on it, but we're not. I think that's probably where we need to reframe that verbiage, that we're bringing in this amount, but it's going to be covering our expenses for it. So it's not a profit, it's a
No.
break even.
No, as you said, it's not a plan to have a big fundraiser on, that's
I mean,
not,
I
that's
don't
not
love the
point.
fund balance being low, but
Well-
this is not the right way to solve it.
And
Yeah,
if you
no,
look-
that's, right.
And if you look at Schedule B, it breaks out to like what those costs to the district are. So you've got things like disposable trays and removing the trash and the garbage.
Right.
I mean, all
Well,
those
that's where I
things,
think, like, that's just,
you know,
okay, well, that makes me,
Yeah.
I mean, because just with the perception right away is not a positive one, without
And
discussion.
Right.
Based on what we're looking at here, is that, because the one question I had is you know, the money that we're talking about getting back at $1,050,000 projected as a minimum, I think you said, because if it's actually better than that, we would
Right.
increase those numbers. Where the other two came in at basically 350 and 270,000. Like, how so far off? That's, when I look at numbers like that, I'm thinking, okay, something funny is going on here.
Look, these aren't projections, we're guaranteeing these
Right,
returns
right.
to the school.
How though, I guess is the question. And how are they so,
I'm
and
not
I know you
trying to
can't speak for
sound
them,
like an ass, but we know what we're doing with these schools. I mean, look at these, if you look at this sales data, if you take these exact same results and apply them here, we're delivering more to you than what we've committed to return. The per capitas that we have put in our budgets to get to that $1 million number are lower than the numbers that are on here. I'm trying to be really like PC here in saying that like this program is underperforming and you have a nice facility here and you're going to have a beautiful facility at the other place. There's no reason that this program should not be on par with what those programs are delivering. And it's the money, yeah, I mean, that's what we're in business for, I get it. But for us, it's, do we keep the kids on campus versus running off campus? Do we help them engage with one another, like in study periods, in passing periods? Do we give them the chance to eat something healthy before they're going to practice after school, or a club, or whatever after school? Are we engaged in nutrition education with the community? Do we become a part of the community? Do they feel like the cafeteria and the food there is relevant, things that mirror what they see at restaurants that they're going to outside? I mean, fast casual restaurants like quick serve, restaurants where they have healthy options and it just feels relevant to them. I think about how advanced high schools are now in athletics, in STEM, in labs, and consumer sciences and culinary arts. All of this stuff is moving forward at warp speed. Where's food service? So, yeah, the money follows if we're doing the job right, but we can't get to the money if we're not providing a really great program for the students. And we know our specialty spot is high schools that are not on the National School Lunch Program. That is our niche. We started with parochial schools, places like St. Ignatius and St. Pat's High School and all of those kinds of places. And then we started doing it with Maine Township High School in '07 and Glenbrook. And then all of these big public districts have come on board with us since then. This is really our sweet spot, what we know how to do really well. If you guys were on the National School Lunch Program and were looking for the lowest cost, we wouldn't be your people. This is just our sweet spot and what we know how to do really well. And you've got awesome facilities to make it happen.
I had that same conversation with Nick shortly after we opened the proposals. I called Nick, and I said, what am I missing here?
That's what I kept trying
Right?
to figure out.
So tell me what I'm missing.
I was like, oh my God, we put in something that they're gonna think we're crazy.
That-
I get it. But I think if you talk to any of our references, the Glenbrooks, the Hinsdales, the Maines, any of them, the Lake Forest, the Island, like, we're not renegotiating terms with them. We're not failing to deliver on the terms that we have. We have a guarantee at Hinsdale. We've been there for 17 or 18 years. We've delivered it every single year that we've been there with the exception of COVID, and that was because our contract fundamentally changed during the 21-22 school year. But if you were to ask them, 2021 year, sorry, if you were to ask them, every single year we've delivered our guarantee, every year. Not one time have we missed it.
So I guess some of my questions are more related to, first of all, I'd love to hear how the taste testing went, because that's really where the rubber meets the road for our kids. But from a parent's perspective, nutritional value, where does this fall in line with, obviously, there are requirements that we need to meet. Can you talk a little bit about what those, are we offering our kids healthy choices? Is the food product that we're offering our kids of high value, of high quality?
So we have a food philosophy that we follow that is not like a we try to or we sort of do sometimes or we strive to. So things like no artificial trans fat. You're not going to find that in anything we serve. No added MSG, hormone-free dairy, 100% cage-free eggs for every liquid and shell egg that we serve. So there are, when you talk 100% beef burgers, like no fillers, nothing. So when you talk about like the quality of the food, I don't want to get, I know I'm standing in front of this, I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but it's one of the things, if you look at like the National School Lunch Program, it pays a lot of attention to like how the plate looks in terms of is there enough protein, are there enough carbs, et cetera. But it doesn't look at all at the ingredients behind the product. And we are constantly evolving our food philosophy and trying to move that thing forward to get things out of food that we don't think kids should be eating. Am I going to tell you that we're never going to use processed food that we're going to serve to the students like a mozzarella stick or something? No. Am I going to tell you that that's the foundation and basis of the program? Absolutely not. We take that food philosophy. It is non-negotiable. It's something we're really proud of, and we think sets us apart from the competition from a quality standpoint when we think about, like, do kids look at the ingredients and think, oh yeah, this is something I would see at another restaurant that I think is legit, whether it's Starbucks or Subway or whatever the case might be.
Okay. And how did the food tasting go, taste testing? What did the kids think?
The kids, when they again, like I said, they had a lot of fun that day. They were there for about 2 hours, right? Jen, I think it was about 2 hours, going around, tasting all the food. And so ultimately, when we looked at first of all, we told the food service management companies, we said, look, bring in food that you're going to serve to the students, right? Not something that would be, the kids say, hey, look, I had the lobster roll at the taste testing. And it's now October of the 25-26 school year, and I haven't had lobster rolls yet. Where are they?
For like $3.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we didn't.
We're showing up
We
too
said
for
bring
lunch here.
food that you would actually serve. Now, some of that may be one day a week, right? Maybe you have a taco bar one day, whatever. And so they went around to all of them. They did provide us with that feedback. And as far as the taste testing goes, they actually rated Organic Life a little higher than Quest in terms of what they saw and what they had. Now, I will tell you, Organic Life had probably about 15 people that came in to the taste testing and had a big setup. I think your team, Nick, maybe had, about 6 or 7 people and also had a very nice setup. And so, again, Organic Life was rated a little bit higher than what Quest was in terms of that day, that particular day.
Just a couple other questions too that I think are sort of related, but it also might be a process thing too that you guys can maybe answer currently too. So there's talk about being able to have students access these quicker grab and go and being able to go and at other times of the day outside of lunch, to, give them some sustenance that they need. Do we currently do that? Is there going to be staff for that? That will be able to assist them with that, again, it sounds great in theory. I love the idea of an after-school thing where you don't have time, they don't have much time, they gotta get to practice, but they haven't had much.
They'll go to Garden Market now.
They do, that's what they do.
So we'd love to
Right.
avoid that.
Okay, so then, and so we will have staff for that?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So their hours, is that a system change from what we've had before?
Yeah.
We've only
We
had
don't- we don't have a cafeteria service right now that provides after-school
I didn't think so
stuff,
either, okay, so that's
That's
gonna
something we
be
would love to explore.
enhanced.
There's a strong desire
Yes.
from our
Yeah.
end to do that, because we just think from a safety standpoint, from a
keep people
collaboration
honest.
standpoint, in order
Yeah.
to give our students the service
Yeah.
that really would benefit them, right?
All
They're
right,
busy, we want to
right.
keep them with us, we're gonna have a beautiful new cafeteria and
Right.
common space, we'll be able to centralize our supervision, so we think there's a lot of benefits to developing kind of a process and collaborating in a way that we can meet the kids' needs there after school and outside of the traditional lunch periods.
And is that something we could implement for this fall?
We're hoping.
Could be.
Okay.
Yeah,
Could be.
if you guys are on
Okay.
board, we are.
And just one other point to that, the employees who work, in the cafeterias, food service, they are not our employees.
Right.
Those belong,
and I think
those
that's why I
belong
was
to
asking
Quest.
if that was the plan. that
Correct.
They would be
They-
employed by them.
Yeah,
Okay.
as part of the RFP, those employees belong to Quest, not to the district.
And then also, sorry, there was something else I was gonna ask about that. I wanted to know, in our process, because, the checkout process is such that, they swipe their ID card and it goes to their account. Do we ever deny our students, is that ever part of the holdup? That like, you have insufficient funds, you can't
No, we do
have
not.
lunch, get out of line,
No.
I mean, I hope not, I'm
No.
just saying, I want to
I
make
can speak to
sure.
that personally, because sometimes my freshmen can go through $40 like nobody's business, and then it's like, I just put money on here, are you kidding me?
Right,
And it's in
right.
the negative.
Okay.
So he's able to eat.
Okay.
That's
Never
not an
denied.
issue.
Never denied. And I'm like, are you really doing that?
Correct. We will, again, going back to the point of the food service, we will make sure that everybody eats. That's
Okay.
our mission there, is to make sure that they eat. Now, they do have to reconcile a negative balance in their account, that has to be done. But we will make sure, we're not gonna turn somebody away and say, sorry, you don't have any money, you're not eating today. We don't do that at all.
Okay. And then my other question is in regards to, I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we've ever done any kind of like composting or anything with leftover scraps. And even going beyond that, I'm sure we don't do anything with food that goes unused to repurpose it with like food pantries or with anybody else who could possibly use it in the area. Is there a potential for that? Do we have opportunities? We have students that are in clubs that do these things too, so.
Right. So let me start off, and then Nick, maybe you can expand on that as well. So you have, the hot food that is served, the cold food that is served every day. First of all, the goal for really the food service management company and the district, of course, we don't want to have large sums of leftovers at the end of the day. Because if that's what we're doing, then we're just preparing way too much food, and we don't need to do that. I think there are potentially issues with moving warm or cold food that's been sitting out to another location. Nick, could you address that a little bit at all?
Sure. So I have some personal experience with this. So I worked for Feeding America for about 8 years before I got into this work. We have done, so once the product, whatever it is that we're making, if it's hot food, once it goes out onto a line, if we don't use it at service that day, it is next to impossible to get it to a soup kitchen or a place
Yep.
like that for safety concerns. If it's product that does not make it to the line, if it's stuff that we have not prepared, or if it's stuff that we have, maybe we've over-ordered on romaine lettuce, I'm just making that up, and it's coming close to shelf life. We have done partnerships with food pantries, soup kitchens, et cetera, like that in the past, The one thing that we always have to figure out is how do you get the product from point A to point B? So absolutely, there's an opportunity there for us to explore something like that with you all. Maybe there's a soup kitchen or a food pantry close by that would be willing to come pick up, et cetera. Composting, recycling, it's really easy for us to do composting in the back of the house with stuff that we are, food scraps that we're throwing away. There's a service that we can work with that does that. That's very easy. The big win, though, is composting in the front of the house with the food that the kids are not finishing. And anything that happens with composting or recycling out in the cafeteria, out where the kids are sitting and eating, we would have to do in partnership with the district. It's the maintenance team, the facilities team, and whoever the commercial disposal partner is. And that is a little more limiting than us just having a partner work with us in the back of the house.
Okay.
And just to kind of expand on that too, in prior years when we have had, for example, canned goods, that during the pandemic was one of them where we said, hey, look, we're not going to use all this food here that were canned goods. Or sometimes as you get toward the end of the year and it's not going to be used, we have worked with Sodexo to donate those things as well. So we're just not throwing those out.
That's easy, yeah.
So maybe this is just, I don't know, who supplies like the plastic silverware?
We do.
Is that the district?
District.
Or you do?
If it's anything that's like consumable or disposable, that's on us. If it's something that's more permanent, like if it was silverware that was being washed and reused, then that would be the
Okay.
district's responsibility.
So like what, do you use like environmentally friendly silverware so that
We
when if we
use-
want to look at composting, it's all of that food, you know what I mean, like could be, I don't know, what are they? I just saw like I had a silverware that was like made from a potato.
We can do that. We
Like
can do
that.
stuff that's
It was pretty
recyclable.
sturdy.
Amazing.
We can do compostable, we can do recyclable. We just want to make sure that if we're spending the money on that, that it's actually going into the right place.
Got it.
Because spending
For
the money
sure.
on the compostable or recyclable and throwing it in the trash isn't accomplishing
Okay,
anything.
I love that idea, just because I think, especially following up on you with what's being done there, that might make it much easier. I don't know, so, totally off tangent.
No, it's good. Good question. Yeah, it is.
There's a lot of options. I mean, the potato was, you could really spear it.
My follow-up was on the education component and the community collaboration, talking about nutrition, flipping the script in a bit of a different way of thinking on how do you create an experience for the students to want to choose healthier options versus just looking at it as just food. Like creating something that is aspirational because it's healthy and it's energy.
Sure. It's a great question. So there's a few things that I would say, and I'm going to start with the boring thing, then we'll go to the more fun stuff. One is pricing. So when we talk about pricing, which we had some conversation with at the beginning, one of the strategies that we will look to sort of do as we're talking about pricing from year to year with our clients is if we're going to look at pricing increases, let's target the less healthy options first and keep the healthier options as low priced as we possibly can. The second thing, and I know that your kitchen designer over at the new campus has already done this, and we'll be working through how to make this happen here as well, is we want to put the least healthy food in as inconvenient a place as possible, so the students have to walk past all of the healthy stuff to get there. And then the last thing when you talk about the experience, so the less healthy stuff is typically just going to be something that a student, for the most part, I'll use French fries, for example, they just take it and go. The healthy stuff, we want to have more of an experience where it's going to be assembled to order for the student. So we're going to have someone in a chef coat standing there engaging with the student, getting to know the student's name over time, talking about what they want in the food, what they don't want in the food, so it really feels personalized and customized for the students. We would also notice more environmental marketing in the spaces going into next year, things that are promoting our food philosophy, signage that's really going to be trying to push things like, we've got a picture in our, you're not going to be able to see it here, we got a picture in our proposal of over at Hinsdale South, for example, we were highlighting cage-free, antibiotic-free turkeys that were raised locally. And so we'll do like signage for those seasonal promotions for things that are in season and are always going to be healthy. We're not doing like in-season gummy worms, right? We're doing like in-season produce and proteins and things like that.
That's great,
So
yeah.
really trying to draw attention to it from a signage standpoint as well. So that's what we try to do in a cafeteria environment where students are in and out in 30 minutes. Those are kind of our tried and true tricks, if you will, but we're always learning new stuff.
That's great, and if you end up doing that mobile interface capability, using that also to kind of reinforce those
sure.
messages would be
For sure.
fantastic.
Yeah.
The proposal that you're referencing, do we have a copy? I don't remember seeing, was it in the?
It's the, it says contract, but yeah, I think that's
So
the
just
same
the
thing, right?
contract is, but not your full proposal with photography of the Hinsdale piece? We don't have that, right?
No, you don't have a copy of that.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to provide. It's probably,
400 pages?
yeah, something along those lines.
Or just the photography of what you're
So-
currently doing.
Yeah,
at
we can take-
Hinsdale would be great.
Sure.
Or any of the other schools, just to see it in action.
Sure.
That'd be great. And then the other thing with the agreement that's in your, or that we received a copy of, I don't think you're promoting the strength of your value proposition as much as you could. That was the one thing that I noticed, because when I look you up, you talk about being focused on fresh, local, sourced, healthy, nutrition-based, strategic, kind of more of a strategic view on what food should be in high schools or in schools. And the agreement didn't mention any of that. So I just think it's an opportunity, because if anyone has, takes a look at that, I think it just reinforces our, if we end up going with Quest, why we went with Quest.
Makes sense. Thank you.
And there's a lot of that in their proposal that, you know, they talk about in there too, so.
I get that too. One more quick question on the mobile app feature. But we also talked about kids, like my son sometimes won't get home till whatever time because they're 20 miles away at a volleyball. Can he, at say, fifth period, go in there and do something that he knows when the last bell rings, that he can just walk by and grab it
That's a
on
good
the way
idea.
to get on the bus from South Campus to here, to get on the bus to go to the volleyball game?
That's a great idea.
Okay.
We're not using it for anything at the end of the day. We're doing it for lunch.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea.
Because I think for him and other athletes, especially when they have to go from south to north to get on a bus to go to wherever they're going, would be really, really convenient for them to just, boom, go by and grab it.
Sure. It's a good call.
Okay.
We often will partner with athletic departments on, like, we call them pack-out meals. So thinking about also like what their meals are that they're taking with them to and from games. So that's another thing that we'll have our dietitians usually partner with the athletic department if there's an interest on the district side, to help work through some of that stuff as well. I know that's not what you're talking about. I know that's a
Yeah.
different thing, but one of the things that we try to do as well. Can I make one last comment? I know it's getting late, and then I promise I'll stop. I just wanted to comment really quickly. I want to make really clear, I have a very deep passion for, and our organization takes a lot of pride in the options that we make available for students who qualify for free and reduced lunches, for the free lunches. I was just looking at the menu that we have proposed for you all, and there are upwards of 10 lunch options a day available for students who qualify for free lunch, including grab-and-go options, so those students have access to that stuff as well, including made-to-order options and assembled-to-order options, not just stuff that they grab and leave. That comes with a fruit, vegetable, side, and milk or water breakfast stuff as well, too. And options that are available at every single concept, every single station. So it's not like free students, the students who rely on those meals are not excluded from certain parts of the program. We really take a lot of pride in not just growing the revenue, as we've talked about here, but also growing the number of meals that those students are consuming. It's a really important part of our program and something that we're super passionate about as an organization. So. Sorry for answering an unasked question, but I just wanted to check.
Well, I have a question about your unasked question. So is there a reason that those students couldn't have a full selection?
There are financial reasons that we can work through with the district on some of those things. So for example, a la carte purchases, I'll just use soda as an example. Is that something that free eligible students should be, is that something the district wants them to take? What the district is typically obligated to do is provide a meal that reflects the National School Lunch Program reimbursable meal. So we have to offer a meal that is well-rounded, and so that and would meet some of those nutritional requirements, if you will. So that's one of the requirements we have to be mindful of with the district, is just sort of making sure that we're promoting the healthiest options possible for those students as they're going through the line. If students are just going through, we had a district once upon a time that was just doing a fixed dollar amount, and those students might get a couple of bags of Doritos and a soda, and that's not really the spirit of what is supposed to be intended for students who are receiving the free meals.
Oh, thanks for the explanation.
Sure.
But related to that note, I mean, how does that affect them as an experience, as far as like it being something that is obvious?
It's
you know,
not.
that they're on?
No. So the free meals are, typically, we will name them after the value meal, or, I'm sorry, after the student's, good Lord, after the school's mascot. And that is a value meal that any student can buy.
Okay.
So whatever that meal is, nobody knows whether it's a full pay student or a free eligible student until they get through the cashier line. So any student can buy the value meal. We don't market it as a meal that's just for the free eligible students at all. That's not at all how that works.
We're actually, really by law, supposed to
Yes.
not be able to identify those
Right,
students at all.
Right,
Right.
because it seemed like, and then.
Nor should we.
Related
quite
that,
honestly.
to that, though, going beyond with the mobile ability, mobile app ability, and also to be able to offer snacks or to-go options outside of the required, set lunch and breakfast times, let's say. Like, our students, will they be able to access that as well?
We haven't had internal discussion
Yeah.
about the free flowing kind of access throughout the course of the day, so I'm not sure how that
Okay.
will function in our
Yeah.
system or how that will work, so we'll have to have some discussion
Yeah.
about how that would look outside of those periods.
A lot of moving parts, right?
I understand,
Yeah.
I understand. It's just,
Yeah.
from my perspective, I feel like I would want to support that opportunity to make sure that students have access to that kind of nutrition and those opportunities at all times of the day, that everyone gets access to that. I feel, pretty strongly about that. I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I think
No, absolutely.
they feel the
Yeah.
same way, so just.
Yeah, I was just speaking to the
let you know
process
that.
at large,
I know,
right?
I
With the
know.
new
And I just want you to know
facility,
where,
a new
where,
company,
coming from.
we'll be having
Those
a
are
lot
all
of
the
discussion.
discussions we'll have administratively over the
Yeah.
next 3 to 4, 5 months.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
circle
Nick,
back and
too,
let us know.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Nick.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Very thorough, thank you.
And just as a wrap-up on this, in your packet, as Dr. Waterman pointed out, earlier today, we were able to obtain a copy of the contract, and really, right now, there's two documents in there. You have a sort of a boilerplate contract that has been reviewed by our law firm, and has been shared with Nick and his team, and they were fine with what we had there. And then also, the RFP essentially spells out really what becomes the contract as far as all those specifics and what's in there and how we operate from there. So both of those documents become part of the contract. And then, of course, the Schedule G will be in there as well, but you already have a copy of that in your packet now. So when we bring all that back, we'll put all that back together for you in one packet. All right.
Any other questions?
Bring that back
Okay.
in 2 weeks and
So, yeah.
have a further discussion about it.
We'll bring that back, right, for our regular action meeting, for discussion. The contract, I think that new addition is gonna help us to hopefully vet out some decisions fairly quickly. Can you just talk briefly about timeline in terms of when we would need this to be voted upon?
Ideally, May 19th would be,
Okay.
I mean, this is one of those that we need some transition time for all
Yeah.
the reasons that we talked about over the last hour, so.
Okay.
If we could bring this back on the 19th and have consideration of approval,
Okay.
that would allow us to get the ball rolling pretty quickly versus waiting until the June 16th meeting, and now we're about 6 or 8 weeks from the first day of school.
Okay.
And I've had that conversation with Nick as well, and he said the 19th is, will
Is
work. We can transition and do what we need to at that point.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for you.
I apologize.
Do not apologize. It was a lot of information.
Yeah.
And it was very,
Nick, thank you for being here.
informative.
So
Thank you.
It was your turn.
Oh,
Right.
exhausted.
We like hearing from you.
All right, next up, curriculum instruction. Our next item is related to curriculum instruction. Will begin with first reading of the 2025 amended school year calendar. Scott Eggerding, please.
So, it's rare that we come and talk about adding vacation days to the calendar.
Right.
But, as we add up our days, and every year is a new challenge with a calendar. We want to try to start around the exact same day, like day of the week, and we'd like to end around the exact same day of the week. And so that doesn't always work, given leap year, election days, et cetera. So the calendar we put together for next year actually had an extra day for faculty. It had the right number of days for students, actually one extra. And so, needing to take one out for the contract purposes, especially with the faculty. So, what we did a couple years ago, we had the Friday before President's Day as a day off, make a nice 4-day sort of winter break, very small version of winter break, but at least something. People like that a lot. But when we weren't able to use the election day as a remote day, we had to take that day away and put it there. And so we just want to put it back. So that's really the big change here. You'll also note we clarified a couple of little things. We clarified our homecoming weekend, and we also clarified when we're going to be doing testing. Just last week, ACT offered the different dates where we could do testing for next year. And we're looking to keep it very similar to what we did this year. Again, with having a split campus is actually a benefit here. When we do full-scale computer-based testing, when our juniors test, the seniors aren't in the building. When our freshmen test, the sophomores aren't in the building. When the sophomores test, the freshmen aren't in the building. So it does allow us to be a little more efficient than perhaps some other schools are, or at least it doesn't tax our technology as much. So we'll be looking to have those on the 9th and 10th of April. And what we hadn't done in the past is clarify who's in school on those days and who's not. And so we have done that here, just that the PACT 10 for sophomores will occur on April 9th, no school for freshmen. And then on April 10th, those will be the ACT for juniors and PACT 9 for freshmen, no school for sophomores and seniors. There are some exceptions, students who test over multiple days, but we'll make sure that we clarify that. But other than that, just taking that opportunity to clean up some little things, giving everybody an extra day off, and still meeting all of the requirements of a state mandated calendar, 183 work days, 176 school days.
And as we always do, I will share this with our feeder superintendents as well, because they always typically try to line their calendars up with ours. So this isn't a significant change at all. They typically look at first day, or start date, end date, and breaks, but this is one that they'll be interested in seeing.
Well, and coming from a feeder district, we really appreciate that, because we pretty much look forward to your guys' so we can schedule ours too. Since we have a lot of students that have siblings that are in both grades, so it makes our feeder districts easier, so.
Right.
Parents appreciate it too.
Yes,
Kids at both
yes.
campuses.
We do start this ridiculously early, in September, where we're looking at 26, 27, but the nice thing about it is, like you said.
Yes, it's perfect.
Everybody can sort of get everything aligned.
Any questions?
This will come back in 2
Yep.
weeks as well.
So we'll bring this one back for approval for our second reading at our next meeting. And then our last item is the first reading of the 25-26 student fee discussion. So that actually is a joint discussion.
Tag team.
It is. You want me to start, Scott, or do you
Go
want to
right
start?
ahead, yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. So,
Just when you thought you were done.
He collects the money, and I make sure.
And then you make sure it goes in the right places.
I have a little bit of energy left. Anyway, so what you have before you is really a long list of school fees here that we're looking at. And first of all, let me back up and say that the district really has 3 fees for all students, okay? The first is a technology fee at $150 per student, and that one was added, about 4 years ago? If I remember correctly?
Right before the pandemic, so it's
Right.
probably 5. During the pandemic, right?
Was it?
That was right when we were starting the one-to-one.
Which
Yeah.
was
So,
fall or
2019.
spring of 2020.
But I don't think we had it in place until that
Fall
fall.
of 20,
Yeah. So there's a $150 technology fee. We are still, as a district, in the business of providing textbooks to students. Some districts have gone away from that, and parents can go and buy their own textbooks. We have not done that. We have maintained our textbook inventory, and so we have a textbook rental fee of $75, which covers all of their actual textbooks, and then a $25 student support fee, which talks about what that covers in terms of the costs related to the district that is utilized for that fee. So it's $250 per student. Now, that's just the general fee for all students. Now we get into essentially all of the other types of fees that we would have here. And I hesitate to call all of these fees, and the reason I say that is because when you look at that spreadsheet there that I have, you would see in column F that, first of all, in column F, we have what we're charging this year for that fee. And then in 25-26, what the proposed fee would be for that year. But what I want to point out is that many of these are course-related fees, and so they're very specific to an actual course. And that's why you see, when you see all these duplicates on here, it's because those courses are running maybe 3 in the fall semester and 3 in the spring semester, right? So we're just pulling it all together and showing you those by courses. But also many of them are essentially really just charges for what we're actually selling to the students. So consumable books, that makes up a large number of these, safety wear, goggles, those types of things. Those are things you could, in theory, go out and buy on your own, and, the district doesn't have to sell those to you. But this is what we are charging if you choose to buy them, through the district. I do know that many parents will have had students who have gone through the district, and some of these consumable books, they will reuse those with their students, provided that they are the appropriate edition of the book, so they don't even have to buy some of these. And many of these end up coming out as just sort of optional fees based on, them maybe already having some of the items that they need here. And then just to give you a little bit more look at that spreadsheet there, again, column F is this year, column D is proposed for next year, and then you see the difference and in that column G. And so if you see a 0 there, then there is no difference in what we are charging from this year to next year. If you see a small dollar amount, $5, it's probably a fee that's going up from $15 to $20 this year. And if you see a larger dollar amount in many of the cases, we probably did not have that fee last year, and so therefore it's something new that has been added this year. And that could be true of some of the smaller dollar ones too. But just to kind of give you that breakdown of why in column F, you may see a 0 in there because we didn't charge that fee this year. You look to the left, there's a fee, and then that will be the increase because we didn't charge that fee last year. Scott, what else do you have to add to that?
You can just note, if you were on the board at the last board meeting when we approved the textbooks, that's been updated. So the Desmos fee for algebra is in there, $34 per student. That wasn't before. And then just if you're curious, generally the way that the coding works for the courses is when it's a 1 at the end, it's first semester. A 1 at the end is first semester North Campus, a 2 at the end is second semester North Campus, a 6 at the end is first semester South Campus, and a 7 is second semester South Campus. So what it means is when you see like 4 of one thing for the same book or the same that means that class is running at both campuses,
Mhm.
both semesters, so we're
Mhm.
charging the students who are in it in the semester that is.
Right.
And other than you have like an English 3 Excel American Studies, there's a whole list of 12 books. Well, they read a lot of books in their class, right? So, so when we approve books, we also give you the total amount charged to the student for that course, so you can get a perspective of what's being charged. So you'll notice a lot of them are for your English classes, and then supplies for many of your CT classes and art classes. And then your languages have a lot of workbooks. So those are our big categories.
So, be happy to answer any questions on those. We would be asking the board to approve these at the May 19th meeting, as we will be opening up our online payment. Usually, we do that, Ed, what about the 1st of June, right? June 2nd. So we'd be opening up that for the 25-26 school year, and would need the board to approve those then, really by the May 19th board meeting. So we'd be asking for that in a couple of weeks.
And Jill, just to your point about revenue making, none of these items are bringing in revenue to the school.
Well, they're bringing in revenue because
Well,
we're
profit. We're not
right.
making a profit. I should
But
say.
no, there's
'Cause
there's
it's a
no
direct to-
correct.
It's a direct pass on the cost.
Okay.
Yes, there's-
I just want to,
With the consumables and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, it's actually, we have to budget more because of our free and reduced lunch numbers, so.
Right.
We don't cover that by charging other kids more.
Right.
Right.
That's something we just budget for.
Correct.
Okay.
thank you for clarifying.
It's covered, yeah.
It just-
I was thinking since it was related to what we've
Right.
been talking about.
I think it's just maybe
before.
like terminology, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I
Like
didn't
profit
mean- I didn't
versus
mean to say
revenue, because I'm
revenue.
seeing revenue as
Wasn't it?
like,
Yeah, no,
you know,
that's how I meant profit. You're
Right.
right.
Profit,
It is-
but they're
it
not
is
Yeah, it's
a
not-
revenue line item,
No.
but yes, I get, yeah. No profit is being made. Thank you. Thank you. Clear.
Any questions, concerns, discussion points?
Brian, I do have a quick question.
Sure.
The $250 per family or per student, have you received concerns or comments from families for it being too high, or
I have
or
not.
anybody? I
Yeah,
guess?
yeah, no, I have not. And I know that, I'm just speaking from my own experience relative to what I pay for my child, that's actually quite a bit lower than what I've seen. And I know, Scott, we've looked at this, we don't have necessarily a recent study, but we've looked at that.
We did when we added the computer fee, but
Right.
couple things with our fees. The fact that we do rent and adopt texts through the $75 fee, it's not uncommon at other schools. It's not unlike college where they go to follow it online and they buy other books. What tends to happen is that is expensive. Kids tend to not buy the books, and the books aren't there, or they're getting used books, or they're buying just a chapter of a book, or it doesn't work very well at the college level, and it's something that no one would do what we've done to start because it's so expensive, right? We have the books on hand, when we
Right.
buy the books slowly through our adoption process, we're able to have that. So we're in a really enviable position there. When we looked at other schools and the fees that they charge, we are very much among the lowest for all sorts of reasons. Schools charge athletic fees in order to play sports. We don't. Schools will charge even more for materials for the classes. We've had schools that'll charge just very different fees that we don't have. A much larger general fee, a much larger technology fee. So we've sort of seen ourselves, and even our driver ed fee is among one of the lowest. It's not the lowest that the statute allows, but it's what we need to cover our costs. It's not uncommon for it to be between $250 and $300 a year rather than what we charge. So, and some charge even more. So we feel pretty confident about that, and as we looked at a lot of those fees, there are some schools that really nickel and dime everything, and we've been really good about that, and I would say we're in good shape as far as that goes.
In addition to that, I would add that when parents log in to start preparing themselves for the upcoming school year, they are made aware of both the free lunch option and then also a fee waiver option as well, that they can apply for. And if they qualify for it, of course, we automatically apply the fee waiver for them. So they would not, that's based on financial status in the house, all of that sort of thing.
Right.
But if they qualify for that, then and also, I think it's important to mention this too. If somebody comes to us and they say, well, look, I don't qualify for the fee waiver, I miss it by $1,000, right? This is a bit of a hardship for me. We will work with them to make payments and, that sort of thing. We're going to work with them on all of this. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Then we will again see this at regular action meeting for second reading and approval. At this time, do we have anybody signed up for public participation?
We do.
Okay. This is the opportunity for second. Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
Joe Arvia. Did I pronounce that correctly? Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
Oh, okay,
As a
great.
matter of fact.
Okay, good.
It has several pronunciations through the years, and I pretty much listen to all of them. So. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Joe Arvey. I'm a vice president with Organic Life. And I just kind of wanted to make a comment on some of the things that I've heard tonight, and moreover, talk about our proposal. We put together what we thought was an exceptionally responsible financial proposal. I think some of the questions that I heard here tonight about the numbers and the difference are valid, okay? How do you go and raise the return 8 times without raising prices, without impacting the families, without students? I can tell you that half of the revenue that comes in goes to food costs. So to raise the profit by that amount, you have to raise the revenue to 300%. And you've mentioned that you have short lunch periods, there's limited access, there's limited time, so that makes it difficult to do that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the food that we served at our tasting. Obviously, it heard that we scored highest in the tasting. Everything that we served came right off the menus of all of our other school districts. Some of them are even in our National School Lunch Program district, so we don't differentiate between the two. We offer and put our best foot forward every single day at every location. We are the largest independent food service management company in the country that only specializes in schools. It's not most of our business, it's not part of all our business, it's all of our business. That's all we do. The chefs that were there was a representation of the culinary team that goes out and teaches the staff in all of our schools how to cook and present the food in the same manner that we did at our taste test. So there is culinary backbone and support to our program that no other company has. I kind of also wanted to talk a little bit about myself, just for a minute. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've worked in 19 states. I've worked for Aramark, Compass, which is Chartwell's, Sodexo, Whitson's, and I even worked for Quest. And I will tell you that I came to Organic Life because this company aligns with my own personal values. I've seen everything from the 100% free eligible students in New Orleans who have no other option but to get meals at school, to school districts like Batavia that we took over last year from Quest, where we've doubled participation. Talking about the free and reduced meals, we don't differentiate anything. The students can get a beverage of their choice, they can get an entree of their choice, and fruits and vegetables. It's 2 sides. So the overt identification comes into play when you say, okay, they can have almost everything in the cafeteria, but could they have everything? We let them have everything. We went from the last year they were serving 50 or 60 free students of their 180 or so that they have eligible to serving 150 students. So it's a matter of the way you present your program and the equity you want to have for those kids. And we did that because we allowed them to make the choices they want to make. Yes, we want them to make nutritionally sound choices, and yes, we put that foot forward all the time. But the difference is, if they're forced into
any choices that are only allowed on that particular meal, it's an overt identification piece. And those kids are identified and they will shy away from participating, so that hurts your program. Let's see.
Okay, well, your time is up, but
It
we
is.
thank you for your participation.
Well,
and-
thank
and
you,
your
I
involvement.
appreciate it. And thank you for your process. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, the board will move into closed session for collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, 5 ILCS 120/2C2. The board will not be taking any action after closed session. Can we have a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Member Beta Daniels.
Yes.
Member Kozolka Campbell.
Yes.
Member Dillon.
Yes.
Member Giannotti Fry.
Yes.
Member Kennedy.
Yes.
Member Lopez.
Yes.
Member
Ye-
Alvarez.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm gonna get Sarah on the phone.